We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained, the new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all mankind. Any thoughts, Joey?
A new world.
Paul, you know it?
Master and Commander?
Oh, I was trying to do my best JFK impression, and there's even a little hint in the end of the quote of All Mankind. It's the documentary on the Criterion Collection about going to the moon.
Ah.
You and I have unfinished business.
Oh? And what's so stinking about it?
Non mi piace il feeling. Spirit is something. I think this just might be my masterpiece.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast. This is Justin.
And I'm Joey.
And in this episode, we are joined by a very special guest to chat about director Paul Thomas Anderson's quirky take on a neo-noir film, Inherent Vice, from 2014. Plus, in my Wheel of Destiny pick, we'll experience the traumatic hours following the assassination of John F. Kennedy through the eyes of the First Lady that strived to preserve his legacy, as we talk about Jackie from 2016.
And just a heads up, we do discuss our full thoughts on film, so if you have not seen a movie, please just skip ahead to avoid any spoilers.
And if you want to be a part of the Movie Clubcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. So like we mentioned, we got our third guest ever on the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast. Welcome, Paul Keelan.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm glad to be part of the elite club. Only 3 guests, so it's pretty prestigious territory there.
So me and Paul met because I had posted my raving review of the Mighty Ducks like about a year ago. And like almost instantly, like you're like, hey, I like your take on Mighty Ducks. You should come on my show. I was like, oh, you got a show? Cool. I got a show too. Did you know that? And you're like, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was definitely like the Ducks that brought us together. Gordon Bombay is a true uniter of kindred spirits across the country. Definitely I liked your way of writing like a ton of bulletin points, just kind of like a moment by moment, off the cuff, spontaneous synopsis of like your thoughts on what's going on with the film. And so I invited you on and we had a good talk.
Yeah, absolutely. It was cool because I've really seen your show really grow leaps and bounds. Like since I listened, like after we first talked, I listened to your pilot episode about kind of, because you do the Cinematic Underdogs Podcast where you guys talk about all kinds of sports films, right? Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. We should introduce it, I guess. It's Cinematic Underdogs. So it comes from, like, of course, the sports term of being an underdog. So many sports movies are underdog films. And there's always the feel-good films. They make you inspired. They're rousing. They hit the feels, hit all the beats of those emotional, manly pulls. They bring you into movies and take out that that emotional soft spot deep inside of us. So we definitely try to tap into that, but we do some headier ones too. So we have a good balance.
Yeah, you guys kind of have a vibe like me and Joey do, because I know me and you, Paul, are really into art films, and your co-host Jordan, he was more into like sports movies, and you guys try to find a cool mixture there.
Absolutely. So Jordan, I would say, is, I don't like to talk about other people's tastes so much, but if I had to pinpoint it, it would be that he's more into I'd say blockbusters, big superhero franchises. He's a super big fan of sitcom comedies like The Simpsons and Family Guy.
Nice.
Whereas I really like sort of obscure, abstract, stuffy European art house films. So I'm the snob of the two, but we balance each other out. And so it really is a good yin and yang, let's call it. We're best friends for life. We've known each other since we were basically born.
Nice.
Lived on the same street, so we go back, and it's just easy between us as well. So yeah, definitely. I didn't know it was so similar to you and Joey. So Joey, what are some of your favorite types of films?
So I definitely, you're talking about blockbusters. I kind of grew up more on that. And as doing the podcast with Justin and with my roommate, who I've mentioned many times before, he's been my roommate now for almost 4 years. It's definitely expanded my taste, but if it's got any sort of strong female lead, Kill Bill, for example, or super stylized, so all of Quentin's stuff, basically, Marvel. But then I also really apparently like noir films, musicals. It's kind of grown and went all over the place, but so it just really depends. I think sometimes I keep Justin guessing because
absolutely,
he did not expect me to react the way I did to the movie that we're going to talk about here in a bit. So
I'm curious myself, actually, because these are both I would consider art house films. I would say P.T. Anderson's much more accessible. He's a little artier, a little more intellectual Tarantino, I would say, our great auteur of the past 30 years.
Absolutely.
That people gravitate towards. And every 3 or 4 years, he's going to put out something that is just monumental, like Tarantino. But Tarantino is amazing. He was kind of my gateway director. I remember seeing Kill Bill, and I think I was 13. Did not know what the hell I was going to go see. And it just blew me away. It was never the same. Yeah.
Way to make me feel old. You're 13 watching Kill Bill. I say that I was 18, but still.
Yeah, just a few years. Yeah. But
we had some.
Maybe I was a few. Yeah.
We had some common ground at first, Joey, because you had first introduced me to Goodfellas. I'd never seen that before, and then Boondock Saints, and so we had a blast watching those kind of guy movies together. So, and yeah, I wouldn't say and I'm pretty similar to Joey in where I kind of grew up. My dad was into a lot of blockbuster kind of movies, and it wasn't until I kind of had my kind of a late life renaissance where I was gotten really more into art house classic films, foreign language film. I just have this inner desire to watch all the greats. So that really attracted me to the Criterion Collection, and just to really explore all that movies have to offer. And it's been so neat seeing all the different interconnections. You'll be watching a movie like The Phantom Carriage, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, wait a minute, that Kubrick stole that scene for The Shining. What the heck? And it's really awesome to see those interconnections.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes, and I love seeing any sort of callbacks in movies. So we've already mentioned Kill Bill is my favorite movie for anyone who hasn't watched this podcast before. But I've now made it my goal. I've picked up Clan of the White Lotus. I went and got Lady Snowblood. I went and got Lone Wolf and Cubs. Pretty much anything that was referenced in those movies. I made it my goal to watch or own, which also has led me to really enjoying a lot more Japanese cinema, also exploitation films. So spawning just from that movie, it spawned a lot way. And between Justin and Carl, and now there's the Criterion channel and the Arrow channel, and so it's just expanded a lot.
So Paul, you lived overseas for a long time. How do you think that kind of changed your perception of movies? You were in Korea, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my second renaissance with movies, because first was college, and I went to a very liberal school, this little art house theater that constantly played French New Wave films. So Godard was every week, or Kurosawa was every week, Antonioni. So it was just the way of life there. So I definitely got introduced to Truffaut and all the French 60s directors there. And Jim Jarmusch types, the sort of newer auteurs that reference back to those types of filmmakers. But in Korea, I was on my own, and I was kind of homesick, and films just became my like mac and cheese, let's call it. I just like lived in films. I could watch like 14 a week, but it definitely ranged from like highbrow to lowbrow. Like I loved everything. Like I loved the comedy Paul. That was one of my favorites with Seth Rogen. I don't know if you've ever seen that one about kind of a little alien. Or Horrible Bosses, I thought was hilarious at the time. Or I would watch, like very, very small indie directors from Thailand, like the guy who made a few films that are really hard to pronounce, but like Tropical Malaise is one of them. Cemetery of the Splendor is another. So there's a ton of directors I became also familiar with just because I was traveling to these areas and trying to seek something out that I could connect to on a meta plane, like on a narrative plane. So yeah, that definitely opened me up to foreign film as well. And just understanding those cultures give you an insight on like a movie like Parasite, where it's about a tutor in a Korean household. Like I tutored rich Korean people in their households, so it's like very familiar to me.
What do you recall any of the Antonioni films you saw that on the big screen? You said that must have been quite the experience.
I definitely saw some Antonioni. I think I saw Zabriskie Point, and perhaps what's the one that has the word red in it? Red. It's like starts off
Red
with
Desert.
A woman in her Red Desert, and she's like in this kind of swampy marshland in the very beginning. I saw that one on the big screen. And the most famous one where they end up on the island.
La Ventura.
La Ventura, I definitely saw.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen. His whole ennui styles, you kind of have to be in the right mood to dive into that stuff. I think you blind bought that one, right, Joey? Can't wait to hear you talk about it. Yeah.
Yes, I did blind buy it at Second and Charles. That just basically went in one day, and I guess someone had probably just upgraded their collection to Blu-ray, or I don't know, was just getting rid of it, and I just blind bought a whole bunch of Criterions. But pretty much anytime I go to any sort of secondhand store and they've got Criterions that I don't have, I just buy them because I'm a crow and those numbers are shiny and I gotta have them. So
that's awesome though, because if you're entering into Criterion territory, then you're gonna catch up with Justin real quick because that's where it's at.
Yeah, but see, Justin watches like 17 movies a day. He's probably watching 3 right now. Okay, I'm being hyperbolic, excuse me. But yes, you all you do for fun is watch movies, whereas I play video games because also it helps with my job. And then I play Magic and binge TV shows and that kind of stuff that Justin doesn't do. So it lends him to watching more. But yeah, no, I have a pretty decent Criterion collection because I tend to go ham during the sales, and like I said, if I go to Second and Charles or a pawn shop or something and they've got Criterions in good condition, I just take them. So, buy them. I guess I should clarify. I don't take them. I buy them.
Do you collect, Paul, physical media at all?
I don't actually. I'm very much digital. Much respect to all those who do though, but don't even have a DVD player. And my wife likes our house to be quite minimal, and I do too actually. So it's kind of for that reason as well. We keep things like as low quantity as possible. But I love to see a good collection in someone's room, like a good vinyl collection or a good DVD collection.
Yeah,
it's just awesome.
I grew up with a whole big wall of DVDs in my dad's house, and then my wife wants them as hidden as possible. So I got a little collection, but probably not as. Joey has quite the showcase, I believe. Does your new place have some shelves stocked?
Yeah, well, we took the bookshelves. The media shelves from our old place, both Carl and I. So if you walk directly into our apartment now, the dining room is like immediately like you're just in the dining room basically. And on the wall, there's each one of our shelves, his is literally almost full now. Had to rearrange everything when he got the Battle Royale Arrow humongous set just recently. I've got a little bit more room, especially since I have some of mine separated out, like because I've got Tarantino and the MCU and Star Wars separated, and then the Criterions for everything else. I have a little bit more room, but it's getting close, like to being full. And then I have another shelf here in my room that's got books on it, but it's also got like all my TV shows, which I haven't really added to recently, but used to be back before I had like Netflix and all of that. I was big into getting TV show box sets. So
right on. Cool. Well, let's move into the next part of our show where we just kind of talk about what we've been up to lately. I'll keep this pretty quick. So, I decided to be a T-ball coach this season, and this will be the first and last season I am ever the head coach of a T-ball team. Because, herding cats and parents at the same time is it's a little much for me. I'd much rather be more on the sidelines, even though I do like to cut. Like I made up a really fun cheer because we're the Hammerheads. So I was like, "What time is it?" And the kids say, "It's Hammer time," which is so much fun. But the kind of the bad thing that happened is I kind of stepped into the role really late in the game, and so I ended up with a lot of the kids that didn't pre-select kind of where they wanted to be with the certain coaches because they already had experience. And so we were kind of starting behind the 8 ball there. And so we've had kind of a rough season. And then last night's game, there was a bad call, and the ump started cursing at one of our coaches. And so half of our parents left. So we were forced to forfeit the game. So I've pretty much seen it all this T-ball season. But I am looking forward to soon. I'm getting the opportunity to MC one of my older son's games. So I was going all through all the jock jams and stuff and trying to compile all this music that I'm going to be playing whenever I finally get a chance to MC his game. So looking forward to that. And going camping this weekend. It's been a long time since I've been camping with my scout pack. Kind of been away from them due to the whole T-ball thing. So I'm really looking forward to being out in the great outdoors. I've been long working on this service project to get this kind of a leadership award in Scouts, and so I'm finally getting that this coming weekend. So real excited there. How about you, Paul? What's going on in your life?
Well, congrats. That's cool. When you talk about T-ball, it makes me want a really good film about youth sports coaches, not kicking and screaming, which is okay. I laughed a few times at any Will Ferrell film.
Bad News Bears was a great release in the middle of this season.
It's true. Walter Matthau, right, with the drunkard who gets slowly warmed up by the kids. Yeah, yep. I that's a great one. But I think it's just such a right topic to make a lot of good movies on. But yeah, in terms of things that are new with me, just trying to stay busy writing, both for my job and for extracurricular projects. Yesterday, I had my 3rd article published by a cool website called 25YL. So if you're listening, check that one out. It was on The Mountain and the sort of recent filmography of Rick Alverson. So he made Entertainment with Greg Turkington. He made the comedy, which is really, really hilarious, sort of strange film that satirizes kind of millennial hipster culture in New York City. And he just made The Mountain with Jeff Goldblum. And that, I think, is his, I called it his masterpiece to date. I would say maybe not quite there yet, but interestingly enough, it hit some P.T. Anderson beats. I've also have a really cool article there about Jim Carrey's comedic style and how he had a renaissance with Sonic. I loved his role in Sonic. I mean, it was the middle of the film, but he's amazing in it. Mm-hmm. And I also have another take on I Care a Lot, the Netflix film that came out this year that was quite polarizing, and I have a very polarized take where I just try to leave it open-ended with questions about what the film was actually trying to say. I was left quite puzzled, and so I just wanted to kind of explore that in an inquisitive manner. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to. So I'll pass the baton to Joey.
All right. So anybody that's been listening for a while knows that I've been without a car. I finally, after many trials and tribulations, have a car. that I got a good price on. I got it from a buddy of mine. Ended up needing to sell a car. And in the East Coast gas crisis that's happening, gas crisis in quotes, having a hybrid with only an 8-gallon tank is real nice.
Neat.
Yes.
It's a Prius?
It's a Honda Insight.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's like 10 or 11 years old. It's a 2010, but I was driving a 06 before that, so it's newer. It gets insane gas mileage. So it has a hatch, which is what I wanted. If I could have, made it happen. So it worked itself out. Now, what sucked was I sold my Xbox One trying to get more cash to get to a car, and then this cost me a lot less than I thought. So I sold my Xbox for nothing, but I still have a PS5, so I guess it's fine. And then I'm getting pretty hyped on Friday, the 14th. The Mass Effect trilogy comes out, the Mass Effect remaster trilogy. So I'm looking forward to doing some sci-fi gaming there. Probably I went Renegade on the first time on the 360 and just killed everybody. So this one I'll probably try to be maybe middle of the pack, or I'll try to be good, but I don't think that'll happen. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I've been listening to a new podcast called the Saunderlings Podcast, and it doesn't really have anything to do with movies. It's actually like a tabletop RPG podcast. It's actually run by a buddy of mine.
Like D&D?
Yeah, it's like D&D, but it's not D&D. It's called Troika, or Troika. I think it's pronounced Troika. And it's basically D&D, but the system, like how you deal damage and go through stuff, is a little bit different. It uses mostly D6 instead of like D everything. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm about 4 episodes in. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you can find them on YouTube, Spotify, wherever podcasts are. It's Saunderlings, Sonderlings. And that's all that's been going on with me.
Cool. Let's get into some movie talk. We like to break the ice and come up with the movie pick'em game. So Joey is going to introduce 2 movies, and me and Paul will say which one we'd rather watch right after the show if we were forced to.
All right. So I'm going to go do the Joaquin Phoenix showdown, since we're going to be talking about him here in a bit. And so what would you gentlemen rather watch, Her or Walk the Line?
I'll let you take the reins first. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely Her. I have only seen it once, crazy as that is. And it's kind of an amazing film from what I remember. It's got that great melancholic tone. Mm-hmm. And anything that Spike Jonze does is just worthwhile, and it's worth revisiting. I think one of the most underrated films is Where the Wild Things Are.
Okay.
His version of that, I love that movie. I saw that with a bunch of friends on a kind of a road trip, and we snuck in some beers and just had a real blast with that movie. And dating back to his Beastie Boys videos, Spike Jonze is just epic. So that would be my choice.
Sweet. Kind of a funny story about Her. I was on one of these Criterion Facebook pages, and I'm like, all right, y'all, should I watch Her or Antichrist? And people were like, dude, you couldn't pick possibly 2 different movies. And I think I went with Antichrist first, which I probably should have went with Her. It's much less traumatizing. But I digress. I would go with Walk the Line just because I love that movie so much, and it's been a long time since I've seen it. That was really the movie I really fell in love with Joaquin Phoenix as an actor, and I was just totally into his performance there. I was rooting for him to win the Oscar, but I got to give it up to Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was great as Capote, so that was definitely well deserved there. Enjoy Her too. Definitely need to get back to that one. Definitely enjoy some Spike Jonze directed movies. But yeah, Walk the Line would be my first choice, but I enjoy both of them. How about you, Joey?
I think in this situation, I would probably pick Walk the Line, just because I have not seen it in a very long time. Like, I saw it probably 2 or 3 times in a pretty quick amount of time. I saw it in theater and then like it came out on DVD, and it's like, oh, I watched it, and then someone else hadn't seen it, so I watched it again. So I watched it in like pretty quick succession, but I haven't seen it in a long time. But Her was so good and so powerful, and like I don't know if I would like. I really enjoyed that movie. I think it was last year, or the year before I watched it. It was in like my top 4 or 5 for that year, but it was like you just want to rip your heart out. And as good as and Joaquin was great, but like there was no love for ScarJo in that movie, and that's that hurts my heart. But probably just because I haven't seen it in a long time, Walk the Line. But both were fantastic.
Right on. All right. So next we're going to go into what we've been watching lately with the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, Joey, what are your 3?
My 3 are... Oh, I've blocked them all out. Style over Substance, Gangster, and Stan.
Okay. Paul, do you have 3 categories?
Yeah. Can I use one from tonight, or should I use different ones?
Use different ones, just since we'll be going in such detail with the feature movies in a little bit.
That's a good point. All right, so for the good, because I'm new at this, I'll say From Dusk Till Dawn. I just revisited that.
Okay.
It's classic, and I loved it again. The bad, Mortal Kombat, the new one.
Okay.
And the ugly, that's a hard one because I kind of cringe liked it, and it's the Happy Time Murders.
Okay.
Like, it's
with Melissa McCartney, right?
Yeah, with Melissa McCartney, and it's really risque. It's raunchy, jokes through and through. It's kind of a one-note pony, and I cracked up the whole time. I thought it was great. So I guess we don't like our raunchy comedies anymore, but I'm down for a good one. And it's definitely a neo-noir, and it took Muppets really seriously, like their physiology really seriously. So like there's a forensic scientist in one scene picking up Muppet fluff and putting it into bags. I just cracked up. I was dying start to finish. So I kind of recommend it, actually. I'm kind of reversing my opinion here. So it's on Netflix, everyone. Check it out.
Look,
me and my
I love raunchy comedies, so that's where we're at.
Check it out, then. Check it out. It's hilarious.
Me and my wife have been really into watching Name That Tune on Fox, and right after Name That Tune is some new Muppet comedy show. And so, like, I was kind of watching the fierce, like, because we were always watching Name That Tune on demand. And so they would kind of like start playing the next episode or the beginning of the next show. And it's like there's a puppet for Kanye West and one for Kim Kardashian. And they're talking like in divorce court. And it's like, I'm really intrigued to see where this goes from here. But I hadn't taken the time to watch it yet. What did you say your first one? Normally we space these out a little bit more, but that was cool that you ran through yours quick. What was the first one you said?
I said From Dusk to Dawn, but I kind of almost want to change it. Yeah. So, I mean, of course it's great, Robert Rodriguez. And just like, I love how they would really let themselves saturate their movies in a certain scene and really just draw it out. Like today it's cut, edit, new setting. And Tarantino and Rodriguez really would steep in a setting from like the opening kind of Texas liquor store. I forget the exact name. It's on the tip of my tongue with the cop.
You should know. Me and Joey should know this. We just reviewed this movie a few weeks ago.
I was about to say, yeah, we just did this. Justin was a little mad at me, as you know, I cheater picked this for Tarantino movie.
Is it Benny's? It's something like Benny something. It's got B&B, and then there's the other place is like the Titty something. I don't know.
Yeah, Titty Twister.
Titty Twister.
Yeah.
Titty Twister. Thank you. It's always alliteration, and I think the liquor store is like Benny something as well. But
probably so, but I don't think anybody remembers it because everything on the inside is so crazy, and then the whole thing gets blown to shit. So
yeah, in the best possible way. The other one though, I wish I kind of said was One Cut for the Dead. One Cut of the Dead. Actually, have you seen that, either of you?
Not yet. I heard it's real meta, right?
Yeah, it's super meta. It's one of those one-shot take films, but it's only like a third of it is a one-shot take. Then a third of it is sort of 3 months in it before that, them preparing for the film, and then the last third is the one-shot take again, but from a different perspective. And it's just a jubilant film. Like, it's just so fun and full of like love for cinema. You have to see it. It's very much like a tribute to independent filmmaking, and it just has like such a rapturous love of movie making from that grassroots level, just oozing out of it. It's so good. I totally recommend that. You'll both love it, I'm sure.
Cool. All right, Joey, tell me about your gangster movie.
All right, so this is actually 2 gangster movies, and they're from Korea. It's called My Wife is a Gangster, 1 and 2. So essentially, in the first movie, there's this woman. She's like the number 2 of the Korean crime syndicate, but the number 1's basically not there. So like everyone just calls her boss, and she finds her long lost sister, and her sister is dying, and her only request is that she gets married. So she has her thugs go out and find her some husband, and then there's just all these trials and tribulations. Like, she doesn't act like a lady, and the guy's all mad, and then there's all sorts of gangster fighting. It was just a really interesting dynamic. And she's like the ultimate hombre. Like, she's a total badass. They're called the Scissor Gang. She actually fights with scissors, and then she can like pull them apart, almost like tricking the hidden blades in Bloodborne. But like, it's crazy good action scenes. And then in the second one, she has like amnesia and doesn't know she's a gangster, and like stops a robbery and then gets her memory back and does more gangster shit. But my only thing that I really hated was that I had been trying to watch these for a while, and you couldn't stream them anywhere. There's no Blu-ray release to like import from Korea. There's just like $40 DVDs, and I was like, I would have paid $40 for a Blu-ray. I won't pay $40 for a DVD. So our good friend Johnny hooked me up with his copies. Okay. They just weren't the best quality, but I mean, they were good enough for getting to watch. So
all right, so my categories, I still haven't spit this out yet. So I have Oscar spoiler, 80s Sweat, which I think Paul will appreciate, where I talk about with that one, and New Hollywood Style.
Let's fine. Let's go. What's your 80s Sweat?
All right, so I was a guest recently on Paul's Cinematic Underdogs Podcast. It was a great time talking with them about a hockey movie I'd never seen before called Youngblood, starring I'm blanking on his name. What's the main actor's name, Paul?
Well, it's not Keanu Reeves.
No.
And it's not Rob Lowe. It is Rob Lowe.
Yeah, Rob Lowe. That's it. Okay, so this movie was like, I was like, am I watching Footloose just with hockey? And it was
Patrick Swayze's in it too.
Yeah,
Wait, I'm in. Let's go right now. We'll just stop recording. I'm gonna go watch this. You said Swayze and Keanu. Let's go.
Yeah, Joey was very pleased this season when I finally decided to watch Roadhouse, and so I got to see another Swayze film this year.
If only we could have done Point Break, to keep the Swayze Keanu tag team alive.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a super cheesy film, but there's a lot of good hockey stuff in there too. Like towards the end, there's all these different montages. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a Rocky moment. Oh, that's kind of a Karate Kid moment. And Keanu plays a goalie in it, and he's apparently he was a goalie in like high school or something. So he has a few moves. Unfortunately, he's not in it very much. Kind of a cheesy love story. There's a part where they initiate him and they go in the locker room and they shave his junk. It's like, who does that? It's a super fun time talking about that with Paul. We went into a lot of detail. You know when that might be out, Paul?
Yeah, it's gonna hit the airwaves. I'd say Saturday or Sunday. Nice. My life's been insane, and I like to go through it and really clean everything up. So it'll hit it soon, but it'll be out there by the time probably this is out there, or hopefully by the time listeners come across it. So check it out. It's gonna be a fun episode. I'm halfway through it.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely check out the Cinematic Underdogs as well. All right, Joey. Style over substance.
All right. So this is my second movie this year, my third movie overall from Mr. Warkong Y. Did I just butcher that up?
Well, I say Wong Kar Wai, but tomato.
Yeah, I think it's Wong Kar Wai, but who the hell?
Okay.
I mean, but it's not who the hell cares, but it's as long as you're a fan, that's all.
It's so subjective. Like I listened to this one podcast, and instead of saying anime, they say anima or something. I'm like, no one says it like that. I don't know. It's so subjective.
So anyway, it's from the WKW box set. How about that?
There you go. Which apparently has a bunch of issues. Aren't people like saying that like some of their discs are messed up?
So when I still had my Xbox wouldn't play a couple of the discs, but my PS5 played everything, and our region-free Sony Blu-ray in the living room played everything. So, which I've discovered the PS5 is also region-free for movies, unlike the PS4 was. But either way, we watched Fallen Angels, and this is
ironic because I think me and you were talking about Wong Kar Wai at one point, Paul, and I think you're like, hey, you definitely need to check out some more of his movies. I think Fallen Angels was one of the ones you recommended.
Absolutely. I want to let Joey go first, but I'm so stoked to talk about Fallen Angels a little bit.
Cool.
So it's my second one this year because I watched In the Mood for Love earlier. And this one I liked more than In the Mood for Love. I did not like it as much as Chungking, which I watched last year. But it's just like I everything about the movie was just freaking cool. But is one of those things where I definitely felt like there was more style in his style than actual substance to the movie. But I didn't really care because it was just so damn cool. And I remember, now I remember the end scene with the motorcycle, which is what's on the box and everything. But I just remember watching it and just the whole time just being mesmerized by what I was seeing on the screen. I'm bad. My memory is bad, so I don't remember much of the plot lines like a month later now. But I just really enjoyed it and would probably easily watch it again.
Isn't that one a sequel to? Is it In the Mood for Love?
No, that one I think is a standalone. It might be in some weird universe with other ones, but I mean, Fallen Angels is, as you said, a lot of style, and the substance is pretty thin, but the style is just so magnetic. Like you'll have this assassin cleaning her apartment, or they'll be in a McDonald's in Hong Kong, and you're mesmerized. It's like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's just so cool. It's so like freaking cool to watch. Whether they're on a motorcycle or just going up and down escalators, it's kinetic. The camera movement is like just pure virtuosity at all points. There's so much panache and style and flair that you can see why Tarantino was so influenced by Wong Kar Wai. And I get why you probably like Chungking the most, because Tarantino loves Chungking. He took like so much inspiration from that film.
And the characters are so addictive in that one.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually, I knew that he presented it was a Tarantino Presents Chungking Express, but I didn't realize, that he, likes WKW so much. But that makes a lot of sense. It also, I was talking about this with my roommate the other day. It makes sense where, I will talk about stuff and I will put stuff together, like pop culture references and stuff that, to me, make perfect sense to connect in my head because of whatever connects them in my head. But everybody else is like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's like, I watched the Quentin Tarantino documentary and they were talking about him doing that same thing to all the things that meant something to him. I'm like, that's where I picked that up from. I just did it. No wonder I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually was fortunate enough. This is how groovy my school is I had a class that did Fallen Angels as one of its weekly assignments. So we watched it, and our professor talked about it, and it's the coolest professor in the world. And he just went off for an hour and a half talking about its sense of temporality and its immersiveness. And he was basically riffing poetically on it. He didn't have anything really substantial to say on it, but he was almost mirroring the sensibility and style of the film. Talking about how it just places you in this world and you're immersed in it and you just kind of exist with it. and a very vague and abstract terminology he was using, but it was so formative in my young movie career. I'm not a career, but like my enjoyment of film. He definitely influenced me with that lecture and that movie when I saw it. So epic. So I'm stoked that you saw that, Jody. It's great.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Just real quick that I haven't even seen Fallen Angels, but just the way you guys talk about it just sounds just so much like In the Mood for Love. So I know I'm kind of in for, and I'm looking forward to finally taking that dive.
Man, Justin, you were at school longer than me, but I was just gonna be like, man, if we would have had some sort of like excellent film class to watch. The only thing I remember was having, for whatever that freshman class is that we took, we had to watch American Beauty, which I ended up borrowing from Jake.
Mm-hmm.
But I never had to like a class where we just watched movies, and
that would have been so awesome. That would have been
so sick. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, besides Fallen Angels, his teacher showed us The Life Aquatic and Cassavetes' Faces, and Hiroshima Mon Amour. So like, it's just epic films, and always had something really amazing to say. And there are podcasts on it out there. I can't think of it on the top of my head. It's something about like the image of the image. So for listeners, his name's Daniel Coffeen, and if you type in Daniel Coffeen, Coffeen, and write podcast, and you search enough, you'll find it. His whole class is online, and it's one of the most awesome like things to listen to. I still do it on a yearly basis. It was the greatest class I ever took. It was just so dope and psychedelic and weird and trippy and brilliant. So yeah, just give it a real quick shout out. And really quickly though, In the Mood for Love is my other favorite Wong Kar-wai or Wai film. You might be right actually with the Y. I don't know. It's like one of those debates of how to pronounce his last name. I've heard it many times. I think at school had this debate on air. But I think that one's very sultry and decadent and slow and romantic. Whereas, Joey might back me up here, but Fallen Angels has got a kinetic kind of intensity. It's kind of fast paced, and it's kind of youthful. It's got a very different vibe and atmosphere to it than In the Mood for Love. I think they're different mood pieces to me.
Yeah, for sure. Like I liked In the Mood for Love. It just, maybe it was the day I watched it, or maybe I was expecting it to be Chun King, or obviously not Chun King, but it. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very well-made movie. It just didn't strike me the same way that Chun King did, to the point of, in my playlist is the Mama and Papa's now. Like, and it comes on, and I just and I see the scenes from the movie and everything. So
yeah, that's interesting to hear. That makes me even more excited to see Fallen Angel, because for In the Mood for Love, it really, like, although they had all that style, it's almost like it kind of sucks you into this trance, and at times I kind of was losing track of what was going on. So yeah, to hear that Fallen Angels has a more drive to it that's exciting. All right, so Oscar spoiler or New Hollywood style?
I'm all right here. Go talk about the Oscars. I know how you do.
Know how I do. All right, so I watched The Father, which Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor for over Chadwick Boseman. So that was kind of the Oscar stunner moment. Most people expected Chadwick to be to get that award, and I mean, both guys were really, really deserving. I kind of wish it would have been Chadwick's moment, just because him having died and stuff. But yeah. So The Father is about this guy with dementia in London, and it's seen through the eyes of someone actually experiencing dementia. So like the movie is like kind of all out of sorts. Like he'll be talking to his daughter, who's played by one actress, and then like in the next scene, she's played by another actress. Like to really make his confusion palpable. And like he'll walk into the kitchen at one point, and it'll have like this certain backsplash and sink, but then at other points it'll be something else, and it's just constantly kind of confusing you with what he's experiencing, really giving you that experience. Another film that came out recently, The Sound of Metal, did a very similar thing, where it really kind of puts you in the headspace of somebody that was losing your hearing, where The Father puts you in the headspace of somebody suffering and really being traumatized through dementia. So and it's really heartbreaking, because my grandmother just moved into town, and I thought she was just a little bit mixed up. I mean, she'll like we'll talk to her, and she'll kind of say the same stories over and over. But recently I was kind of having a heart to heart with my mom, and she's like, man, it's really tough because, you can really see that, she's kind of suffering from these dementia symptoms. So I'm looking forward to getting together with my mother and watching this father and kind of seeing how she relates to that, having going through that on a family level.
That's really powerful, yeah. Actually, my wife, her mom kind of is having signs, and so we're debating watching it at all because it's kind of rough to watch things when it feels too close to home. So that's brave and cool that you're going to do that with your mom.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah, it's such a powerful movie. I definitely think you need to tap into that. All right, what's Stan all about, Joey?
Stan, we're double Stan here in a way, because I'm going to talk about The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Okay.
It's not technically a movie, but Letterboxd lets you log it. So.
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah. So. Stan as in I stand for Sebastian Stan, because boy, like, I'm gonna be real, like, I have no problem with the Falcon becoming the new Captain America, and I get it. Damn it, why couldn't it have been Sebastian Stan? That's all I wanted out of the whole show was just the Winter Soldier. I just, my favorite Marvel movie is the Winter Soldier, because it's a spy movie more than a superhero movie, even though they're super soldiers. But no, I had a really good time watching it. I think I watched like one episode one night, one the next morning, and then I came home from work and just watched all the rest of them. So I watched them all in like 24 hours, because I don't do the week by week thing. Like, so Disney or D Plus keeps releasing all these shows week by week by week, and then I'm just like, all right, everyone's talking about Mando, I guess I'm gonna wait till the end. Everyone's talking about Wanda, I'll wait till the end. But it had like a lot of good action, and I did really enjoy the story. I think the one big trip up to me was the next to last episode, where it starts off hot and heavy, from the big reveal, or the big thing that happens at the end of episode 4 into 5 with that really killer fight scene, which kind of mirrored the fight from Civil War. And then the whole rest of the episode is like you're supposed to be building to this big season finale in the next episode, and then they spend most of the episode just like chilling on the boat in Louisiana, and it's like, not that was bad, but it just was like build. All right, we're gonna stop, chill, next episode, and all the way to the end there. So, and Agent 13 coming back was really cool. I won't say the thing that happens with her, but I fucking called it, and it made me so happy that I was correct. So
that's funny you say that. The second to the last episode was kind of out of the groove, because I was so into that episode that I actually wrote about it a little early, and then I kind of blew my momentum there. But yeah, I wasn't going to watch these Marvel shows at first, but then the WandaVision was going on, and they showed the whole Quicksilver reveal, and I'm like, well, geez, I gotta catch up with that. But I've been really digging Disney Plus's week by week thing. It gives me something to look forward to every Friday. Like right now, I'm watching the Mighty Ducks Game Changers every Friday. Paul, have you checked that one out yet?
Absolutely not. I'm so curious. How's that going?
It's so, oh goodness. So it takes a lot of plot beats from the original Mighty Ducks, but it's stretched into like this whole like 7-hour span. So we're like, in the original Mighty Ducks, you're like, okay, we want to see them start winning already. It's really, really a slow burn to get to, some eventual success. But now that it's finally getting there, it's, that much more rewarding. So it's been a really interesting ride. There's been a lot of great cameos in it. Emilio Estevez is Gordon Bombay in it. It kind of has the Luke Skywalker syndrome from The Last Jedi, where he's just like, yeah, I know it was super cool before, but yeah, I'm just kind of not interested anymore. It's like, why? Because the show says he has to be. So that's one of those little hang-ups. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and my kids look forward to watching it too. So it's kind of a fun family affair each Friday.
Yeah, we definitely have to catch up on that. We'll probably cover it. Hopefully, maybe we'll talk to you about it. I'll have you come on real quick to briefly go over that on one of our special episodes, because we'll do miniseries and shows once in a while. So
Yeah, you guys inspired me to watch The Last Dance, which I was super glad that, I was, you guys really built it up for me, and it did not disappoint.
Yeah, no, that one's such an encapsulation of the 90s. It's just like living in the 90s again for those 10 episodes. That's why I loved it.
I need to watch that so badly.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And there's like an episode dedicated pretty much to every player for the most part that was a key player. So you get your Rodman episode. You kind of get a half episode for Steve Kerr even. You get an episode for Pippen. You get an episode basically for Phil Jackson.
Yeah,
and
triangle offense.
Yeah, they're such eccentrics. That's what I love about them. Jordan too. He's an eccentric in his own right. They're all eccentrics, and so they're just fascinating people. Besides being a part of this dynasty that was one of a kind. So,
I mean,
well said.
So yeah, if you grew up in the 90s, I mean, you either hated the Bulls or you loved the Bulls, and there's like no in between. And if you lived in like Indiana and New York especially, you did not love Chicago Bulls.
Absolutely not, no. And you really relive those rivalries through that documentary. So those are their two main rivalries. After the biggest rivalry, perhaps, is when they got beat up for years by the Detroit Pistons. And those games were insane. The level of physicality, the way that they just beat up the Bulls year after year until they finally,
It's so much different than like watching basketball now where it's like they look at a person and it's a foul.
Yeah, Jordan and I talk about that a lot. It's like the crybaby era, right? And they just, just go over the top and flailing their arms and moaning to the refs. And like back then, Jordan was a pretty slight NBA player. You know, he's buff, but he's like not, Ewing on the Pistons and stuff, or actually that's the New York Knicks. But he's not these big guys that would just beat him down, but he would take it, and he learned that he had to stick in it and man up, and that's part of their like coming of age story. That's part of their arc, is like the ability to step up to these bullies and punch them back in the mouth, kind of. And
that is an interesting thing. Like if you take looking at like how basketball and football especially were played back then, they're so much more physical. I mean, obviously football is still very physical with the kind of athletes and stuff they have, but they were much more geared towards more of the original style of the game. And as their TV ratings and stuff got bigger, you saw the rules start skewing towards offense, like you can't, and so you see the point totals and stuff go up. I mean, like if you hit 100 points during like the Bulls era of like the 90s, you're like, it's a high scoring game. And, there's games where they're almost at 100 points at halftime now. And it's like, good Lord.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of it is the physicality has been mitigated greatly. I mean, they definitely perfected the mechanics of three-point shooting in ways that they didn't have back then, right? So, like, Curry's unreal. Like, he's unprecedented what he can hit. And there's going to be more and more players like him. But still, like, it has to do with the change of the format and structure and flow of the game. And I love those gritty basketball games. Just a quick shout out, like, I'm a huge college basketball fan. And this year, the UCLA Bruins had a great run in March Madness. And people were loving it because they represented old school basketball. They actually play tough, single possession games and make teams grind it out. That's how they had a huge run. And it was just like a tribute to how basketball used to be played to watch them. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And like we were talking about, I guess to keep on this tangent of basketball, like in Jordan's day, you didn't have people like Dirk Nowitzki, just, a 7-foot power forward / center running and shooting threes. He was dealing with, Dominique Wilkins and Patrick Ewing and Mutombo and these just big, imposing centers who rebounded everything and blocked everything. And, it's just how much the game has changed. So,
absolutely, yeah. Great conversation here. But we Justin laughs. I'm thinking we got to move on from basketball.
Yeah.
No worries. Good to hear about all y'all's passion for the sport. So my last one, you kind of inspired me when you had mentioned your first renaissance into movie loving, Paul, earlier. And I would say mine kind of happened in high school when I got really obsessed with like Oscar films. So that's when I first saw Midnight Cowboy. It's notorious for being, the one X-rated movie to win Best Picture. I didn't remember much about it from back then, but man, watching it now, it's so full of this just luscious style. And it's such a bummer movie too. I mean, you don't really really pull for the characters because the main guy, Joe Buck, I think his name is, played by, oh goodness, what is his name?
Not Dustin Hoffman, the other guy.
The other guy, who's a national treasure, and I think he's
Robert Redford,
Angelina Jolie's dad or something.
Voight. John Voight.
John Voight, yeah. So he plays Joe Buck, and he's kind of like this wannabe kind of cowboy guy who thinks he's going to go up to New York and be this gigolo. And then, Dustin Hoffman totally transforms into this real scuzzy kind of con man. And to see them come together, and it's such a bummer movie, but at the same time, it's just so rich with all this new American Hollywood cinema style. And that was an instant 5-star in my book. I was really impressed with what Midnight Cowboy pulled off back then.
Nice. Totally. I should probably check that out.
Yeah, it's definitely in that what they call the New American Renaissance, right? The 70s era where they got a bit grittier. The conversation you could throw in there. We were talking in our Slapshot episode that could be thrown in there. Absolutely. I think Slapshot in its own gritty way fits in that
makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Once as well when I was pretty young. And it is a seedy movie, right? It's got a sordid plot, but it definitely brings you into it. And it just has such a great sense of atmosphere and character building. Yeah, it's a classic. I want to return to that now.
Yeah, and I one of the podcasts you had introduced me to when we first met was Unspooled, and I went back and listened to their episode and just how they dissected how the music even kind of speaks to Joe Buck's mentality of him being totally oblivious to anything around him. It's such a clever movie. All right, well, without any further, did you have something else, Paul?
No, I definitely have to listen to that episode. I haven't heard it. It's one of the ones I somehow skipped.
Gotcha. All right, so let's get into our feature movie of this episode, Inherent Vice. Joey, you picked it. You dish out that plot synopsis from, I'm guessing, IMDb?
Yeah, it's from IMDb. So in 1970, drug-fueled Los Angeles private investigator Larry Doc Sportello investigates the disappearance of a former girlfriend. So, Justin, I think, I shocked you a bit when I picked this. You gave me Paul Thomas Anderson. What did you think I was going to pick instead of this?
I thought you were going to pick Boogie Nights just because, I don't know, I guess it seems like a flashier film on the surface. I would really have hoped that you would have picked one of my favorite movies of all time, There Will Be Blood. But instead you picked Inherent Vice, which I have an interesting history with. So that was one of the last Paul Thomas Anderson movies I had watched. And I kind of was looking into it before I watched it. And I think I even watched an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson. And he's just sometimes I just kind of get lost in the plot, and that's okay. And I kept hearing about how incomprehensible this plot was in this movie. And so that's kind of how I approached it the first time. I just kind of let it wash over me. And a lot of stuff really didn't sink in. Where this time I have seen a lot more noir/neo-noir. So I've seen The Big Sleep since this. I've seen The Long Goodbye. I've seen, I rewatched The Big Lebowski. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. You got some of that in there too. So watching all these other noir films really complements what, I think PTA was kind of doing with this approach to noir. Now, I want to go ahead and throw it to Paul early on because you said you've read some of this author before. It's Pynchon?
Yeah, Thomas Pynchon. He's an icon in postmodern literature. I studied literature in college, so he is the 20th century American great. But he's very polarizing too. So to explain Thomas Pynchon is tough, but a lot of terms can be thrown out that kind of help just quickly kind of summarize what he is. He's encyclopedic. His novels are like a tome of information, whether it's history, science, rocketry. He's really geeky and nerdy about all this stuff too, and he's really stony about it all too. So he has a really stony take on everything. He's always writing these sprawling 1,000-page novels filled with ensemble characters that are quirky names, and there's so many you can't keep track of, and it's just layers on layers of paranoia. And so I guess in a weird way, Inherent Vice is kind of perfect because his plots are almost incomprehensible, and yet you're still rolling with the tide. Like, you're still flowing with it. You're still having a groovy time, and there's connections being made that you're savvy to, and there's a lot of intelligence going on and seething behind the scene. There's all this commentary, often about 60s and 70s culture, about gentrification, about Nixon. But he has novels set entirely like in the early 20th century, or like one is about two map surveyors, I believe, in the 19th century, mapping out the Mason-Dixon line. He has another one about the World Fair at Chicago. So he likes discrete time periods as well. So trying to actually wrap this up, he's one of the great postmodern novelists because he's super meta, he's filled with paranoia, you never know what to believe, and you're always kept on your toes and you're never fully satisfied. And so I think that's why people like and don't like Inherent Vice as well. It really did a good job encapsulating what Pynchon is as an author. It's very much a marriage of our Anderson, who I consider like our great author. Like he can do no wrong to me, and Pynchon, who I actually have a love-hate relationship, as most people do with Pynchon. I've read Gravity's Rainbow, the audiobook at least. I listened to it. Against Today, I'm talking like each of these are 1,000 pages. The Crying Lot of 49, if there's any listener or if you guys want Pynchon Light, it's an amazing novel. It's like 180 pages. It's very cogent comparatively, and it's got like surfer rockers in the 60s and hippies and dive bars and this cool like trail of neo-noir detective, like it's like a puzzle that kind of slowly is figured out. So that one's great. It's the closest one, I would say, the sibling to Inherent Vice. They're the most similar novels. And so I've read that one 3 times, the other one's only once. But he's worth it. He's worth at least an attempt at if you're going to get into literature at any point. But yeah, he's a tough cookie, and this is a tough film. I've seen it 4 times, and I'm still a little puzzled, and I've listened to the audiobook for it. So it's a tough one to decrypt always. So
super appreciate that perspective, because I thought he was just into like writing noir. So to hear that he's into all kinds of different eras and storytelling, and I mean that perfectly matches up with PTA, because what PTA is all about, capturing different eras too, whether it be what he does in Boogie Nights and what he does in There Will Be Blood and so forth. So wow, what a combination of artists there.
Yeah, absolutely. P.T. Anderson actually said he wanted to adapt Vineland and Mason and Dixon first, but they were just literally impossible. They're just too abstruse. They're too big. They're too inscrutable. He could not do it. So he finally found Inherent Vice, which is actually a pretty new novel. I think it came out in in the early 2000s. It came out, not that long ago. And this guy's career spanned over 40 years, and he's a famous recluse too. So he has this cool persona. The Simpsons have had Pynchon on as a character, like fictionalized in The Simpsons a few times, but like almost no one knows what he looks like, and no one ever sees him, and he just cracks out these epic novels like every 10 years or so, and he just keeps the literary world constantly awed, but a little bit baffled and annoyed too. So he's kind of a trickster figure in that scene.
So I think we've done a pretty good job of kind of drawing the outline of how obtuse this movie is. Now, I'm really curious to hear Joey color in the picture and say, what he dug so much about this movie, which I was shocked by.
So, well, I mean, apparently I was going to like it from the get because, according to you, I'm obsessed with noir. So... And to give a little context to that, like Joey was all about him with some Humphrey Bogart and the Maltese Falcon, where I was like, I really like that character, but this plot doesn't do a lot for me. So that just gives you some context there. Oh, well, that and, I guess, I never really thought of Lebowski as a noir movie. The noir is such a, the first time I heard, I won't say the first time, but, started, I was like, oh, it's a noir movie, and so I kind of like, well, what is noir? And then, you know, there's no like hard and fast definition. It's like I wouldn't put, like, you asked me what I thought about this movie compared to Lebowski, and I was just like, why the fuck is he asking me why these two movies are, you know, connected? And then I kind of thought about it a little bit, and I was like, I can see it, you know, they both kind of got these like kind of crazy and out there plots, and
yeah, kind of a story that doesn't go anywhere, right?
I mean, yeah, and I saw one of your notes, which kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I was suspicious about one of the things, and I guess it kind of solidified my suspicion and then added to it a way. So we'll get there in a bit when we get there.
Okay.
So like I made some notes here, and I think a little different than how you go about it. But like first off, the cast. Like the first thing as soon as I saw like the cast list, like the cast is just stacked. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, Josh Brolin, Maya Rudolph, Martin Short, Eric Roberts, I think. Like, he's always the bad guy in everything. So if you see him, you just know.
You know what's special about Maya Rudolph being in this movie? You want to let the cat out of the bag on that one, Paul?
Was it her first time not doing something comedic? Like,
they're married. P.T. It's P.T. Anderson's wife.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
At least he doesn't do like Kate Beckinsale and Mila Djokovic's husband and just puts them in everything.
Yeah, there you go.
So, the first thing, like honestly, I think part of the reason I like the movie so much is Joaquin is he's stupid good in this movie. I guess I should just say he's stupid good in general, but he was stupid good in this movie. And also the whole time I kept thinking, like, what is Leonard from The Big Bang Theory doing in this movie? But it was just the way they had his hair and everything. He just really reminded me of that. The whole 70s, I guess late 60s, early 70s aesthetic just, you know, stuck out. You know, they're on the beach and they're calling hippies, and it's, you know, just people who want to hang out and smoke weed, versus, and then you see like Josh Brolin's character Bigfoot, and, you know, that's their normal life, and, you know, just that whole how everything was, you know, I guess the juxtaposition between that. And then there were definitely parts, especially when they're more at the beach, where there's this kind of like interesting tint and coloration to the movie that I just really enjoyed. So I do think it went wonky, or like, because I know it was thick, but then it went wonky in some places, and it's just like, is this supposed to be like a drug trip almost, kind of like, you know, from Doc being a stoner hippie kind of thing. And then he also just kept slipping out of these crazy situations, you know, from getting bashed in the head with a bat and waking up next to a dead body, or having was like 20 kilos of heroin and living like, it's just it was just wonky and crazy, and I just really dug it. So and we forgot Owen Wilson's in the movie.
Martin Short.
And, yeah.
I'll go ahead with Owen Wilson, my bad.
Oh, he's just he's a sax player, right? He's just dead sax player.
Oh yeah.
Dead in quotations. Who's also like a snitch for everybody, nobody, everybody. So I just kind of sat there the whole movie kind of going like, you know, what kind of absurdity is going to happen next? And it typically never disappointed. And then the whole thing at the end with the I'm a sucker for a love story, so, you know, that whole thing played into it. And then, you know, the this doesn't mean we're back together, and so it's just it just kind of captivated me the whole time. And I'll let Justin kind of start more of the actual points of the plot.
Well, I was curious, Paul, like, so where did you kind of start with this movie, and where are you at with it now?
Yeah, I started a little cold to it, actually. I'm such a huge fan of P.T. Anderson, and such a huge fan of Pynchon, even though, like, you know, I have a sort of strange back and forth take on Pynchon's work. I'm still like a mega fan, spent so much time with him. So it should have been amazing, and then probably my expectations had to come back to earth after a viewing or two. but it always mesmerized me, just as much as his novels did. You said a lot there, really curious, and I want to speak more, but I'm just curious, Joey, real quick, who is your favorite actor? All these big actors in these kind of tiny roles, right? I don't even know, you probably did we mention Reese Witherspoon?
Oh yeah, I completely forgot. That was one of the things in my review, that they were back together in a movie, was her and Joaquin.
Yeah, right. And there's just so many great actors, and they're all in kind of small roles for their stature, right? Like, I mean, Owen Wilson can lead most films, and he's just a kind of an afterthought in this film. So, who surprised you the most? Let's take Joaquin out, because this is Joaquin's film. He's utterly amazing in it, as you already noted, right? He steals the movie. He can do no wrong. But besides that, like, other than the small roles, like Jenna Malone's in it, does a pretty good job. Justin, are we missing anyone? I feel like we're missing still some actors. There's so many good actors.
Did you say Martin Short?
Yeah, we've said Martin Short about 4 times, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because I said it, and then you said it, and said it again. This was probably only 3 times, but...
Did we say Martin Short?
Who's Martin Short?
I don't know what the actor's name is, but the 2 real snooty cops who are like giving Joaquin Phoenix crap. Like, I recognize one of them. I think he's a comic or something. I don't know his name, but he really stood out to me as well, whoever that is.
Yeah, that tall, lanky guy. He stood out to me too, but I don't know where. He's one of those faces that are so familiar and they're in everything, but you don't know where they're from. Yeah.
But as far as stealing, honestly, he was only in it for a small part. But Martin Short always kind of, I think, steals everything. And he's always these like really over the top, like animated characters, and at least everything I've seen him in, which I don't think is a lot, but just enough that every time I see him, I'm like, bro, this guy.
Greedy little hippie.
So what?
Well, doesn't he have the line? Well, doesn't he like pull out some kind of upper inhalant kind of thing, and Joaquin's all diving and snorting as much as he can. He's just like, "Hey, you dirty little hippie!"
And he's like running out with his pants like halfway below his knees.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, he's hooking up with all the patients or whatever.
In Japonica. Why I remember that, I guess because it's Japonica.
Yeah, the names are so good, right? I mean, that's pinching to a T. His quirky names just get at something. They're very cartoonish, but they're fun. The names. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Martin Short, like, he fit that role, not knowing especially anything about the book, but just like he fit the role, it fit the movie. In that, like, is this really happening? And then you have this like serious thing where it's like, oh, this is where they're doing all this weird dentistry stuff, and you start seeing pieces get put together, and and then like the scene where you lead up to that building where he's remembering this event with I've forgotten her name, with the missing girlfriend, and he walks down, and then it's like, oh, there's this building here that you could see where they had kind of looked like they had started construction in the memory. So that was kind of cool as well.
Oh, the rain scene?
Yeah.
Oh, that was real beautiful.
Yeah, that scene is so lovely, right? So melancholic, and the Neil Young song is just so plaintive and beautiful. I mean, that scene really, I think, gets at you like no other in the film, right? It just feels like the tone shifts there, though. It definitely feels like nostalgic and melancholic suddenly. And not
it's
just
so weird how they lead up to it with like a Ouija board. Like all of a sudden he's just like instantly knowing where this new drug den is, and then they go and have that scene. It's a very strange build up to it.
Oh yeah, and the fact that they weren't just like on like a date or something and that happened. It was that they were like speeding through the rain to find weed because it had been a dry spell for however long, and then you get this whole that whole sequence. So
the music alone too in this film is just amazing to me. So well done. I mean, Johnny Greenland did the score, which is actually one of his, I think, lesser scores in terms of the P.T. Anderson films. Right there, Only Blood is amazing, and Phantom Thread is amazing. This one kind of gets lost, but actually
I totally agree.
Yeah, his needle drops though in this movie are great. That early song, which is Can, kind of a krautrock band from I think Germany. It's called Vitamin C. It's one of the great songs with that beat. I'll botch it if I try to mimic it with like my voice, but It starts off in the very beginning, right? In that where you were saying, Joey, like the color tints were great, right? Like on the beach, and he's outside on that kind of Venice beach like street, and they start with that beat and that song, and it takes you for like the next 10 minutes. He lets the whole song play, and it just becomes hypnotic. It's so good. And the way the beat comes with the title card, I love the beginning with the music. And a lot of the songs throughout, like the Velvet Underground, I think, are in it, or at least music that evokes the Velvet Underground are just great. Martin Short, I like that you picked. I mean, are you familiar with Phil Spector at all?
Phil Spector?
Yeah.
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. So Phil Spector was famous for creating what's called the Wall of Sound. He's also famous for murdering a bunch of people. And so he's kind of like an O.J. Simpson figure. He was crazy, megalomaniac, but like made like all of these great albums. I think from Beach Boys albums, a lot of like Motown, a lot of pop albums back in the 60s created the Wall of Sound. He looks exactly like Martin Short. And when I was seeing Martin Short in this role, because it's set in this period as well, I was like, oh, he is so perfectly cast for like a crazed drug addict type character. And I was just like, we've got to create a Phil Spector film pronto with Martin Short in the role. So I thought of that definitely right away. I love Benicio del Toro in this just because.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can't forget him. Right across from Joaquin, like two of my all-time favorite actors, just like hanging out and ordering weird food like eel cakes and jellyfish, which is another Pynchon motif. He always has these quirky ass foods that people eat. The little humor in this is hard to get, right? But there's so much tiny nuance of humor. I think it's a hilarious movie first and foremost. That's what I got from it now on my fourth watch. Was just how funny it is. Almost like wall to wall with jokes, actually, punctuated by these real moments of melancholy and kind of sinister, stony, insidious vibe that goes on. So it's a cool balance, but it's definitely a comedy in there too.
Yeah, definitely picking up all those themes. I mean, one of the noirs I forgot to mention was Chinatown. Like the whole like disappearance of the one guy is very Chinatown, and the whole like how they're redeveloping this area is very Chinatown. And then like the whole like story where it's like not kind of. I really picked up on the fact this time about it's not about it. This is one of these movies where it's not about where it's going. It's about the journey to get there, and through the eyes of this kind of like stoner PI who's really lamenting the fact that the 60s have come to an end, this hippie era has come to an end, and now you're merging into the more serious, straight-laced world of what Josh Brolin's character represents. So I was definitely picking up the whole Fear and Loathing vibe, and Benicio just showing up and being like, yeah, I'm this man's attorney. I'm like, holy crap, there's Fear and Loathing right there. And I don't know how I didn't pick up on that the first time. And in terms of characters like Brolin, yeah, he really stands out because he's such a parody of himself in this movie. He's like the chocolate banana scene where like Joaquin's just kind of looking at him, and it's like kind of fuzzy with Joaquin in the background, but he's just just gnawing on this chocolate banana, very phallic like. It's just like ugh. And there's a part where he's talking to him in his office, and he's doing all these like sex gestures with his hands. And then the more I look through the movie, I see like how he makes little cameo appearances. Like he's in that commercial at the very beginning with the afro or whatever, talking about the land development. And then later on, whenever he's stoned out of his mind, he shows up in this random cop TV show. And then I have a pretty good feeling that final scene with him must have been like a hallucination where like he's like eating marijuana off a plate or something after like busting into his place. It's really interesting to think about what in this movie actually happens and what part of it's just this drug daze that he's in.
No, so well said. I'm just going to pick up really quick before I pass it to you, Joey, too. But I love some of the things you said there specifically, because this does play with those noirs. Chinatown, right, is so on point because of the gentrification, because of this sort of sinister syndicate of money in LA that's doing these nefarious things behind the scenes, because of like the paranoia that Chinatown really is based on. And then you also earlier brought up The Last Goodbye, which is Altman, which P.T. Anderson has always paid homage to Altman. That's like his great
Oh yeah, Magnolia, 100%.
Muse, right? Magnolia, yeah, 100%, right? And you kind of get the sort of, I love The Long Goodbye because it's a very, as they call this, kind of a shaggy dog detective film. It's kind of lazy and goofy and slow, but serious. But definitely The Big Lebowski comes in here too, because it's about like a stoner who kind of is in over his head, and constantly gets pulled deeper and deeper into this story that kind of goes nowhere. But in that sense, it's really, really similar and parallel. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is the relationship or the dynamic, the juxtaposition between Bigfoot and Doc Sportello, because that's so central here. And I like that you brought up Bigfoot's basically the 70s. He's basically Nixon incarnate. With his crew cut, his square head, his square jaw, his weird sort of homoerotic love of like chocolate bananas is strange. And there's that weird scene in the car where Doc Sportello, Joaquin, is sitting there just watching him eat that frozen banana. Is very, very bizarre. And I read a really cool review by Matt Ziller at Ebert's namesake. And I'm not going to get into the quotes or anything, but he says that he thinks they have actually like a weird love story and they get each other. And I'm just paraphrasing here, but I think he's on to something. And he also says that Doc constantly is trashing Doc. He's beating up his property, his feelings, his body. And yet at the same time, he's equally like inept and incompetent and like at the whim of other people, like his wife. And he kind of picks on the hippie, right? Because he needs to pick on someone, but they have this sort of bromance going on that's really strange. And they're kind of one of the kind. They're kind of both bumbling, stumbling figures that really don't know what they're doing. So as much as like the cop hates the hippie and the hippie hates the cop, they're both basically cops. One's a PI, one's a real cop, but like it's weird. They have so much overlap, right? Besides their contrast, that is a really cool dichotomy going on, right? The conservative versus the liberal, you could say, like the bell-bottom dudes versus the suit dudes, blue state, whatever you want to divide it as. Like they kind of represent those, and yet they're the same. And I like that they're making this comparison and saying like we're not that different. But anyways, Joey, I'll let you take it.
Oh yeah, so talking about the relationship between Doc and Bigfoot. So I don't remember why. I think there was something I thought was said, or maybe I just kind of put it together in my own head. I felt like Bigfoot was like part of their group or something, and then like did the proverbial growing up, and became a cop versus a PI. Went more straight-laced for whatever reason. I guess he thought he had to get a big boy job or something. And so I thought maybe they had known each other with the way that they had interacted and that kind of stuff with each other. But like you said, yeah, it is almost like there's this bromance where just one is almost like the bigger brother, and he picks on and beats up the little brother, but no one else can do that. Like when like the Golden Fang gets involved, he's like, no. Like I can beat you up, but these guys can't. So that was a really interesting part of the movie, was seeing them interact with each other basically throughout the whole movie.
It's crazy how many scenes there are of them actually talking on the phone. When I was flicking back through it, it's like they're almost constantly on the phone, like in a lot of these cutscenes.
Yeah, and like I guess that's also something we don't see in like usually newer movies, because they're set more modern, and so you don't see people on a phone talking. You see them texting or what have you, but to see them on like house phones and all that kind of stuff was real refreshing as well.
I kind of wanted to dive into the style of the film. So I guess one of my main disappointments with this movie when I first saw it is just because P.T. Anderson is so he paints such a broad canvas. Like the first scene that comes to my mind is The Master, when you see Joaquin Phoenix running through this huge field. It's just these big, epic scope and really interesting angles and kind of bizarre music that really makes me it's kind of Kubrick vibe, I would say, really draws me in. And then but Inherent Vice is so. I was listening to one video essay and it mentioned like how a lot of the scenes, like it starts kind of wide but it just gets closer and closer and closer to these two guys' faces, and that's the majority of it. The one part that kind of stood out to me is whenever he's walking into that office of the Golden Fang, and it's from like a side shot, and it's very Kubrick, where how he's kind of like walking through the door up into the reception desk. I was like, oh yeah, I can definitely that's Kubrick to a T, or even Tarkovsky. So one of the things I noticed was, although this is a very dark and kind of gritty looking movie, it's also extremely colorful. Like you go in the scene where they go into like the closet of ties that have all like the naked women on it. I mean, so much color there, but at the same time, it still has these it has this dark overall aesthetic. So
yeah, it's definitely a sunlit noir, as I saw many people mention. Right, it's a noir that's we call neo-noir, but set in daylight. And what I did also gravitate towards on my return viewings of this is how subtly visually stunning it is. From like the opening shot where we have Joanna Newsom, who's our narrator. Really quick trivia with her. There's a ton of funny connections that she has. First of all, she's an awesome folk singer with a really, really weird sound. But second of all, she's the daughter of the governor of California. So you've probably heard over the past year all the politics and the craziness of Gavin Newsom and Trump and stuff. I'm just guessing. Have you?
Not sure.
Okay. Anyways, and then third, she's married to Andy Samberg. Am I mispronouncing that? The film last year, the time loop film.
Oh right, oh goodness.
The comedian, Addie, yeah.
I want to say it's Paradise something, isn't it? What is it? That movie called? I'm on it. Hold on.
It's like called 21, or is it called Joshua Tree or 21? What is it called?
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, duh. Like I live in New York.
Groundhog Day.
What's the city name, right? Yeah. Anyway, she's married to him. She's got all these connections. She's not really an actress, but she was in this film. But, it starts off with her talking, doing the narration, actually on the screen. And then you get this really psychedelic overlay, right? Like a double exposure of like a blue light. And then it kind of enters into that image, right? Or when Doc Spatello gets knocked out, or actually doesn't get knocked out, you have this great shot of him walking into that sort of, I don't even know what to call it, but it's kind of it's part of the Aryan Brotherhood's new residential center.
The massage parlor?
The massage parlor, right? That was going to be exactly. It's the quote-unquote massage parlor.
All right.
And then suddenly you get the flags on the screen, and then it subtly merges into the shot of Joaquin Phoenix lying on the dirt next to it's such a great name. I forget the guy's character's name, but it's so great. Who he kills, or we don't know what's going on, right? But there's all the cops, right? There's so many transitions that are so skillfully done here. There's another technique that he does where characters are constantly walking into the scene, but you can't see their heads and they're talking. This happens with Bigfoot's wife, where she comes and belittles him when he's on the phone in that very ornate house that they live in. This also happens at the retreat center in Ojai, when the wife of Wolfman, the main missing character dude, when Joaquin goes to meet up with her, right, and she has that young handsome boyfriend with the short shorts.
All right.
He walks in the scene. We never really see his head until later. He's doing really interesting stuff. A lot of low shots visually, right? And a lot of comedic gags visually. The three dudes picking their nose in the scene where he's talking with the detectives. Did you notice that, with the guy just going at it in the background? That I was impressed with. Like, there's a lot of subtleties going on here that were hilarious. But yeah. So, did you notice any of the stylistic elements, Joey?
I mean, it was one of the, I noticed mostly the tint and stuff. I definitely feel like just talking about this movie, it's where it seems like I'm kind of blanking out. It's that I'm sitting here trying to remember, man, I really need to go rewatch this movie, because
it's a blur.
It's kind of a hard movie to talk about beat for beat because so many different stuff happens and so much of it's inconsequential. I mean, you have that one actor that was so famous from Boardwalk Empire, the black guy, who, I mean, it's a great scene, but I guess that kind of sets up the whole Aryan Brotherhood. But and like he's like, wait a minute, you said you did business with who? So just little moments like that throughout. And I love how like the voiceover. So I guess in modern movie criticism, so many people criticize having voiceover, but in noir, that's kind of one of the signature elements. And I really like how it's this fantasy kind of girl that's doing it, kind of giving us this insight of like him in the era instead of exactly what he's thinking. Because I don't even think he knows what he's thinking. He's kind of always in this daze. So I didn't really pick up on it either time I watched the movie, how like these sequences with these two girls are pretty much his fantasy, or even maybe it's his memory. It's kind of hard to tell.
And that was what I was alluding to earlier. So the narrator is that Saunderlings? I guess that's her name. And part of the way through the movie, I was just like, is this chick even real? Because, I never thought about Shasta not being real. But the other chick, I definitely was just like, is this just someone talking to him, like, in his head, like talking to him kind of deal? And I kept trying to figure that out. Once I kind of had latched onto that, I was just trying to figure it out. But then there's because she's the one that they're playing the Ouija board with, if my memory serves me correctly. And I was just like, okay, maybe she is real, but I could never really pinpoint it. And I guess that was kind of the idea. You don't really know what the hell is happening.
Yeah, she's an interesting framing device, and she's also one of the few creative licenses that P.T. Anderson takes from the novel, where she's in the novel, she's a character, and she is in a few scenes in the film, like that are real scenes, like the pizza parlor at the very beginning. She's next to him and she kind of actually says it, but really quickly. I didn't catch that till my third time, where she says, like, she brings herself into the moment with the narration, and so you get, okay, now she's embedded in the story. But the other problem is that she also looks a lot like Shasta to me, Joanna Newsom and Watterson, the actresses, and so I got that confused the first time because they look so much alike to me that I was like, wait, we have like Shasta, who's commissioning Doc, or at least trying to seduce him to do this like detective work for him. And then we have this voiceover who knows everything and is omniscient. And I thought they were the same person. It got me very confused. But they are separate. But I do think that your suspicion of like, is she real? Is she imaginary? Is what ultimately P.T. Anderson wants. And I read that in a few reviews where they're like, I'm 90% she was actually a character, but I'm not 100% sure. And I think that's what he really wants. He wants that phantasmagoric sensation in the audience that, like, am I hallucinating? Is this real? At all points, right? Like, you mentioned the scene with the character from Boardwalk Empire, and he's constantly writing on his notebook, like, hyper paranoia alert. Like, yeah, he's just constantly writing notes to himself, like questions.
Yeah, he's just like writing his impressions of the interview instead of anything going on in the interview. It's like it doesn't matter what the guy's saying. He just wants to like notate the vibe of the interview, which was very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joey, coming into this, like, it is an artsier film, and a kind of an enigmatic one, a trippy one. How well were you able to follow along? Like, was this your first viewing, and if so, like, did you keep up?
I mean, yeah, this was my first time watching this. I think it's my third PTA film. I saw Boogie Nights when I was really young, and I was a teenager, so of course I was just like, drugs, porn stars, oh my god. I think everyone in that time period, kind of fell in love with Heather Graham because she was in that, and then she was in American Woman, and then she was in Austin Powers, and so it was just, she was kind of a big deal. But then I saw a few years ago, several years ago now, the aforementioned There Will Be Blood, because I watched it and what's the movie with Josh Brolin in it?
No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, I like how you just knew what I was. I watched both of them pretty close to one another, and I didn't really dig either one of them, but at the time it was before I had kind of changed, my taste haven't changed as much. Like, I would be really interested in going back to watch No Country for Old Men, and I probably should go back and watch There Will Be Blood, but every time I think about it, I like fall asleep.
It's definitely a flawed masterpiece, but that's for another conversation.
But I mean, oh man, the guy who's won 800 Oscars and is in
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, DDL. So like he's such a powerhouse of performer that like that would be the part that would interest me in that movie. But as far as keeping up with this, like I felt for the most part I kept up with it really well. It's definitely it's not a Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas where like I had not tripped enough acid to follow that movie. So like I thought I for the most part kept up with the interwoven storyline. Like I'm used to stuff being disjointed. Being a big QT fan. So I mean obviously this is a different style of just stuff being disjointed, but I actually kind of really dug a lot of that. How it kept you on the edge or kept me on the edge of my seat, because some of it was the discombobulation, but then it was also everything that was happening. So I thought it was a real good mix of all that kind of stuff.
To follow up on the theme, it's interesting with this quote, inherent vice in a maritime insurance policy is anything that you can't avoid. Eggs break, chocolate melts, glass shatters. The doc wondered what that meant when it applied to his ex-old lady. So it's definitely like lamenting like this past relationship, I guess, or lamenting this lost era of the 60s. So it's really cool to it was nice to kind of see that spell. It's kind of like when you first notice the wave rolled in line from Fear and Loathing. If you follow me, Paul.
Oh yeah, definitely. It has this vibe of inevitability too, right? Like that sin will happen, the fall will happen, the wave will crash, right? And that is the like ethos of this film. Is it's steeped in that kind of bitterness of the 70s, where the like high of the stoner vibe or wave has crashed, and now everyone's just kind of puzzled and confused, and everything's a little foggy. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not a glamorous depiction of that era, as much as it is an exploration of its aftermath too, and the fogginess that came. So I love that quote. I mean, that's pinching to a T, and I love the examples he uses. They're just so perfect, right? Like these qualities of these substances are embedded with decay or fallible properties, right? Chocolate melts. What was the other one?
Eggs break.
Break, glass shatters, right? Mm-hmm. Like everything has its own kryptonite, its own weak point. And it's like, where are those weak points? What are the seductive forces that draw them out? And that's also this film. Like, it's filled with sin. It's filled with drug abuse, right? It's filled with people being drawn into worlds and underworlds and dark schemes. I definitely it encapsulates the vague theme that's going on, because it is quite vague at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very rewarding when that finally kind of really comes out within all the subtleties put together. Anybody entranced by Joaquin Phoenix mutton chops in this?
Oh, I mean, bro, they were epic. I mean, I'm sure you remember, Justin, when we, probably the last time we saw each other in college, where I had the big old chops back then, and I thought they were the coolest thing. Well, yeah, because I was like 18, and I was like, oh look, I can't grow a beard, but I can grow these big old mutton chops, and I thought they were like the greatest thing. And the few pictures that exist from that time period of me, I see them now and I cringe. I cringe real hard.
Yeah, I love his chops. I love the fact that he gives himself a perm in the beginning.
Is that what the little blue things hanging off his head? Was that what that was going on there?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
But hold on, it's not a perm. It's a permanent.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
My bad. But no, he got great mutton chops, great shaggy dog look.
Absolutely.
And I love it when he gets all snazzy with that brown suit too. I like that shift in his getup. No matter what they did with him, he's just perfectly cast in this role. It's far better than No, I won't say that, but it's up there with his great roles. He never almost does wrong, but I actually like Joker. I mean, it's a hot take in some circles. I think he does great in Joker, but I even like this one.
Okay.
Personally.
And I mean, despite all these brilliant moments, there's still it's still kind of a frustrating film at points. Like, I would say the one point where I kind of zoned out is whenever kind of the seduction scene where like she's naked and like kind of crawling up on him on the couch or whatever before that really intense like sex scene all of a sudden. And until that happened, I was kind of zoned out of what exactly was going on, and then I kind of like snapped back to it once we had that aggressive lovemaking scene. So it's funny to listen back to like critics at the time and just everybody noting how frustrating it is, but it's really one of those movies that really has to kind of reverberate several times before it really sinks into what it's getting at, which it makes it was very rewarding cinema.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most potent scenes though too of him using style to mimic the substance or mimic the pace and temporality of the scene, where she's talking to him in this very monotone way for minutes, and I think he's trying to bore you into this emphatic moment. I think he's trying to put you into like a hypnotic state and also almost a dozy state, and then to like smack you or spank you awake, right? Like literally she gets on screen. Right? He does that a few times with like these really drawn out scenes. There's a scene where they're in that tunnel. It's him and Joaquin Phoenix, Doc, and I forget the name of the character, but it's the what's the character's name? The kind of saxophonist who
Owen Wilson played
Owen Wilson's character. I'm blanking on his name though, but they have this long conversation that the camera slowly pans into, like minute by minute. So yeah, it's definitely kind of drawn out at moments. His
name is Coy, by the way.
Thank you, Coy. Yeah.
Joy for the win.
There's definitely a lot of juvenile humor in this. The anecdote of it in the / vignette of his wife about how they didn't meet cute but met dirty in the bathroom stall is pretty raunchy stuff. Like when you hear that about how he was taking a gringo shit and she was throwing up, and that's how they. Did you not catch that? Like it's like.
No, I missed that part entirely.
Oh yeah, that's how they met, and then she ends up like performing let's just say a favor for him in the stall in this very gross moment. I mean, it's trying to really push taboos, and it constantly does it. And it's going for a quirky humor that's super raunchy and risque that you can miss because it doesn't scream it. It's very subtle as well, so it's weird. Were there any moments that were gaffes for either of you, like that just didn't work at all? That's what I wanted to ask too.
Just you said didn't work,
Yeah.
I think within the context of this film, they probably would have become forgettable to me at this point. Like, I'll run through a few moments that really stood out to me. Like the whole mock Last Supper with the pizzas. That's like a photograph. That was kind of a moment for me. Josh Brolin's character yelling for pancakes in this Japanese restaurant was pretty memorable. They're touring that health facility, and the doctor starts mouthing the words of this anti-communist kind of rhetoric in this movie. So many little moments. It's hard for me to say. I would say my big flaw with it would be the fact that, like I had iterated before, that, there are these scenes where you kind of get lost and, kind of put into a trance. And that should be a good thing, but it kind of plays with you. So it's kind of confusing.
I really remember the scene where he's outside and he's talking to, I think her name's Jade, and it's like real foggy, and they're like in a back alley, or at least it seemed like it was a back alley. And if I'm not mistaken, that's when like Coy comes through at some point, or another person comes through like out of the fog, and there's just I don't know. I just like the way it looked. And then like you said, the pizza, that was I thought that was really interesting because I was just not what I was expecting there for whatever reason. But then I was just like, oh, well, it's stoner food, and this, like, I don't know, it just stood out. Like that, I thought it was weird, but at the same time, when you thought about it, it like made sense.
Totally, yeah. That foggy scene in the alley stuck out to me too. And back to that scene where Doc meets Jenna Malone's character, and she talks about how she has these fake teeth, right? At one point, she hands him a picture, and Joaquin Phoenix shockingly jumps in. You're already laughing, right? Yeah. That's the weirdest moment in the film, though. It's such a weird.
Comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, right? Did that work for you? Did it throw you out? Did it was it jarring in a good way or a bad way? I'm still trying to get my head around that, because I was like, that's so tonally off, and yet you're with a great like P.T. Anderson that he approved it. So you have to question your instinct and maybe it was supposed to be that way, but
I think it almost works like that rough sex scene where it's this sudden contrast and what's going on all of a sudden that really snaps you back into it. It's just like, hey, wake up. Okay, here we go. So
for sure.
So yeah, the to me, I'd kind of forgotten about that whole that weird scream until you just talked about it, and I was just like, oh yeah, that is the thing that happened. And I remember thinking, was it really that bad, or was he just overplaying it to appease her, because she's like, oh my god, it's so bad. She shows him the picture and he's just like, ah, and it's just just kind of overselling.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's and it's so weird because we're sitting, we that's how I took it, but it was just y'all are like, oh, this is this kind of movement that broke the scene or whatever, and I'm just like, yeah, I think he's overreacting. I don't know. It's really hard to say and interesting to look at.
Yeah, it seemed visceral, but it seemed also kind of cartoonish. So exactly what you're saying. I was left what was the effect of this, and what was his intention? What was his thought? Was it real or not? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
One thing I like is the whole idea of the Golden Fang, what it represents, where what they're selling these drugs, and it causes these people's teeth to fall out. And then so they run this tax, some kind of tax thing, dentist office or whatever, where they put the teeth back in. So it's this whole consumer industrial complex kind of deal that's that they're roping people into, which I guess is definitely kind of a sign of American culture, modernizing. I'm not sure if I would say it was as early as the 70s. I mean, it might have, but yeah, it's definitely where things are going with American society, with consumerism. Have you ever seen that episode? You ever seen that episode of South Park where they're selling the how valuable gold is or whatever, and then the grandparents will buy the gold and they'll give it to the kids, and the kids will melt it down and sell the gold, and it's this never-ending cycle of selling gold. So kind of reminds me of that.
That
sounds about right. Yeah.
Never seen that. I also love the building though, the Golden Fang building. That looks so cool. And what's the name of the ship in the film? The main ship that. Is it the Golden Fang too?
I think
they called it. I thought they did call it the Golden Fang too. It's really kind of playing with what your expectations of what this Golden Fang is, because it kind of keeps changing forms.
Yeah, because that is. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Joey.
I was gonna say because the boat is the Golden Fang, and then they start kind of referring to the people who work on it as the Golden Fang, like a gang called
like
the
a
Golden
syndicate,
Fang.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then he walks into the building, and it's Golden Fang.
It's literally it's usually this big golden tooth thing. So. Yeah. I'm curious what you think, Paul, about so a lot of people come into this movie and it's like, oh, this is incoherent Vice, ha ha ha, hot take. But I mean, the movie does kind of deliver a pretty thrilling climax with him getting handcuffed in the neo-Nazi den or whatever, and him having a little gun moment. I mean, the movie does give you this climax with how it wraps up. It just takes a lot of muddling around to get there. So any initial thoughts on it actually paying off in that way?
Yeah, I mean, actually, now that I've watched it 4 times, I think this is very coherent. It's tough. It's very hard to follow, but it actually all kind of comes in. And like we were mentioning, all the different Golden Fangs, that's kind of brilliant, right? It's like this mutable protean clue that just reappears, and it also lends to the like disorientation of, or the delusional aspect of, what is real, what is not, what is like the lead, what is not the lead, what is the pattern to find what is not the pattern. And the fact that it kind of all kind of wraps up in, like you said, kind of has an action thrilling denouement of like a finale that's rousing on a cinematic level too, I thought was great. Joey, did you like the ending? Because the ending was pretty actually kind of action packed for a film like this, I thought.
Yeah, like, I mean, you know, you get to see Joaquin, his character, you know, shoots that guy, and, you know, these...
Did I get you?
Yeah. Did I get you? Just like, before he walks in there, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you got him pretty well, and he walks in there, and he's, like, triple tapped in the chest. I'm like, yeah, he's pretty dead. And then, you know, you've got Brolin. He's like, come on, let's go. And he's like... Or he's telling him Brolin that we have to go, and Brolin's just like, yeah, I'm gonna take these drugs. There's plenty for evidence, and it's like, bro, he's like, we gotta go get your car out of impound, and I was just like, yeah, I see what's about to happen here, and sure enough. But yeah, no, it did have a good payoff for going through everything.
It's kind of funny how, and at the end of the day, Doc doesn't buy into this whole like consumerism thing where he trades the drugs and just gets his bud out of you know, whatever pickle he was in, and you know, just kind of moves on with life and doesn't really exploit it and, you know, get a bunch of money out of it.
Yeah, that too is really humbling, right? There's like a decency to his character that's quite endearing throughout. Like he may be a, you know, what they call the shaggy dog detective with no goals or ambitions, but that's like his attribute that is redemptive as well. He's not just like a capitalist scumbag who's constantly trying to like better himself at the cost of others. I mean, you kind of appreciate that out of his character. He's genuine, dude. And that's just real talk, I guess, as well.
All right, let's get to ratings. Let's go around the room. We do it Letterboxd style here. So out of 5 stars, Paul, how would you rate this one after your 4th viewing?
That's easy because I did my Letterboxd review today, so it's 4.5. I do half stars if that's cool. I know some people are anti-half stars, but
no, half stars are fine.
And it's my lowest of, I think, the P.T. Anderson films, almost, which is crazy. I'm a huge fan of it, but 4.5.
How about you, Joey?
I also gave it 4.5. So where you're like, it's almost your least favorite. I'm obviously not as familiar with him, but I would, you know, basically not really being able to remember a lot of Boogie Nights. Like, I definitely probably say it's my highest rated one. So, but you know, like I said, I haven't watched a ton of them. I do want to watch more. I was very interested in Punch Drunk Love, and was going to pick it even against the behest of Justin. But I started.
Which wouldn't have been all that bad. It's just I had seen it a few months ago, so.
That's fair. But I started like reading the review, and, you know, like synopsises and stuff, and I was just like, no, this movie sounds really dope. So I guess maybe I really do like noir films because it's what I was like, yo, let's go. For sure.
So when I first saw this film a few years ago, I started off at a 3.5 just because I really wasn't getting into it, and it kind of lost me. And then this most recent watch, I definitely moved it up to a 4. But man, after this conversation, I'm really the themes that we've been kind of digging into are, you know, really flushing out even more to me. So I'm getting my golden fangs into them, and yeah, I'll move it up to a 4.5 and join you, boss, with that 4.5 rating.
I see what you did there, by the way. Nice.
You know, I like the wordplay.
I like that wordplay, sinking the fangs in.
All right, Joe, you wrote this little toss to break here, so I will let you have it.
All right. Right after the break, we will talk about an American tragedy and the woman who lived through it.
All right, we're back on the Average Joe's Movie Club cast with our guests Paul, Joey, and I'm Justin. And our next movie is Jackie from 2016. Get into the plot synopsis. Following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy fights through grief and trauma to regain her faith, console her children, and define her husband's historic legacy. That definitely sums it up quite nicely.
Also from IMDb, just to throw that out there.
For the record.
Yeah.
There you go. Paul, I'll let you go first. Had you seen this one before?
Yes, I had actually. So this is the second viewing. I think I watched my first one. It was in my binge kind of watch phase. I definitely remember it being a huge Oscar talk for Natalie Portman's role, rightfully so. I was interested to read some different takes, though. Some people thought that she was a little stilted. Her accent was a little too strong for some, and some people love her accent. So I kind of felt both. It took me about a quarter of the film to really vibe with her. And then once I did, I was all in. Like, I thought her performance was amazing by the end. But at first, just because it is so accented and so caricature-y, though she's like trying not to be, and she's such a force and central focal point of every shot, that I thought it came off as too strong almost at first, and then I slowly eased into it. That's just my honest reaction, because I think she does an awesome, amazing job. It's like one of those great performances that I'm impressed by, but on a visceral level, it took me a little bit to get into. But I loved it actually this time way more. I thought that the framing device was a little weak. That was probably my only weak point that we can get into, was the interview with the reporter. I liked what it was doing on a meta level, on a narrative level, and what it did to the story about the construct of one's mythology and one's legacy, and the way that you have to sort of edit and censor and control your narrative, much in the same way that we talked about, like with Jordan in the Last Dance, and how he's constantly trying to take control and own his own narrative. But I don't know what it was about it. Perhaps it was Billy Crudup. I thought he was strangely, I don't know if he was strangely cast. He just acted a little strange in it. And I just didn't fully buy it.
Definitely cold for a journalist, which is a little peculiar.
Yeah, it was like he was in a slightly different film. And I thought that Bobby Kennedy, played by, one of my recurringly favorite small actors, Peter Sarsgaard, was great, but intermittently coming in and out of the accent. Like, a few scenes he really had that, Boston, Massachusetts, Kennedy accent, and a few scenes it was a little less pronounced. I thought that was strange. And then Richard E. Grant, to me, I love Richard E. Grant. He's like an unsung hero. Everything he's in such a small role, but I love Richard E. Grant in here. And Greta Gerwig, too. She had a very warm, casual role that I found kind of adorable.
Very consoling. I definitely did a double take when I saw her. I didn't expect her in this at all. Pre her going the directorial route with Lady Bird. Joey, your overall thoughts?
I really thought the movie was I think it's a very good movie. Easily, just a really good movie. And hearing that she got Oscar talk for the role really makes sense. I think she really brought it. And then as far as the accent, I remember when she first started talking, I was like, okay, this is this is really strong. But the more you watch the movie, it just became her voice, what it was, what you were supposed to be. I thought it really, really, as far as its vibe being really drab and dreary, it kind of fit everything that was happening. If this movie had been real bright and vibrant, and then we were talking about a funeral and a death and it just wouldn't have worked. So I think that the kind of muted tones really fit, especially against the pop of just a pink dress or the pink lipstick or the blood in the scenes. I thought that was all done super swell.
Awesome. I would say, I was hearing a lot of that same kind of criticism where people weren't, necessarily on board. But I guess I was just so emotionally connected with this one so early on. Some of the real traumatic scenes of right during the assassination. I mean, you see a lot of blood there. I think by far my favorite moment was whenever she finally goes in the shower and you see the wave of blood, washing out of her hair finally. I was actually brought to tears in a few moments of just how emotionally powerful this thing was. And I thought it was very clever how, like, there was not only was there the framing device of the interview, but there's the framing device of the whole White House tour, which really goes, is kind of a subtextual element of the whole legacy thing. Like, you're leaving your legacy of like decorating these rooms, and, John didn't like how, she was being extravagant, but at the same time, she knew they needed to leave their mark. And I really like that scene where, Bobby's like, man, we only had this much time. We could have done so much more, really kind of hammering on, the legacy of it all. And so it was very interesting to see her be nervous in a television kind of tour thing on top. So it's her acting as Jackie Kennedy, acting, to be mannered and very eloquent on camera, which is very layered performance. So it really sucked me in early on.
Yeah, I really liked the flashbacks, especially that kind of bigger one at the beginning, because it first popped on the screen and I was like, oh man, they're going to use actual footage. Like, it was my first thought until, then you see Natalie Portman on screen and it's like, okay, it's not, but they took the time. I want to like do more than just a filter, like to make it look like it would have then, like instead of just putting you in her shoes while she's doing it, like they made you watch it, like you would have back then, and I thought that was a really cool touch.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that it was still Natalie Portman, even though there's like real footage of that. I think it was Life magazine documentary sponsored tour of the White House, but that was the key theme that I fixated upon in my Letterboxd review, was the tour of the White House as her primary characteristic of this film was introducing, and the moral conundrum of whether she was proceeding to go forth with her public appearance in the funeral as a act of vanity or as an act of preserving and honoring the legacy of JFK. And I think that they played it very fairly, very complexly, and with tons of nuance, and it constantly kept you on your like toes morally of like, how do you approach this? What are the proper protocols, and what is the etiquette here? Yeah, and she's aware of it, and it's really about also all of the not to make it too gendered, but it constantly is like men telling her all these things, even JFK earlier telling her that her interest in renovating the White House was frivolous, right? Behind the scenes, she talks about how he thought it was like kind of a waste of money, kind of superfluous. And that is definitely a gendered thing. Like, I think women definitely are drawn to interior decorating in a way that guys aren't. And we'll spend our money on, boats and DVD collections and all these sorts of things, right? We'll definitely be very flippant towards like decorating. And it sounds so frivolous when I'm talking about it, but I think it actually had weight in this film of like, here's a woman taking her stature seriously and living and exhibiting and emanating eloquence and stateliness and charisma at the highest level as JFK did. Because really what they both were, more than anything, even more than politicians, were icons. They're American icons. And so that's why this film was very powerful. It was like about an icon being told all these things and then going at the very end and doing it as she wanted to do it. Like the power of her going through and walking along DC at this funeral, and the bravery of that, having just witnessed your husband assassinated like next to you, is pretty inspiring is the wrong word, but it's pretty stunning. It definitely had me impressed. I did not think so deeply about that part of the whole JFK scenario and event. Everyone fixates on like who shot him, the multiple angles, all the conspiracies. We never looked at like just Jackie's experience. I thought that was a really interesting angle to take, and they did it in a really complex and deep way. So I really appreciated this film. I thought that it was a great piece of postmodern cinema in the way that it's not revisionist history, but it's taking history from a new perspective that we never offered before.
Didn't she even have a line to where like, I'll walk, for my husband's legacy in this procession, and I mean, let them shoot me, they'll put me out of my misery. I think was kind of a line that they alluded to at one point.
Totally, yeah. So she is. It's a daring act. It's
and it almost bites, and it kind of bites her in the ass at one point, because she was not aware of Oswald getting shot, and then she kind of paraded her children out there, and she definitely regretted that at that one point. But then ended up shielding them, and then moving forward with the the giant procession there at the end.
Absolutely, yes. And the other thing that this film does so well is it's stylized in a way that brings what would be mediocre material and elevates it exponentially. And starting with like what you mentioned, the scene in the shower where she's letting the blood roll off. I mean, of course it's so different than like Psycho, but I kept thinking of like horror film kind of tropes. And there's
definitely.
Yeah, like a horror film element going on.
I love the scenes of her just kind of walking slowly through the different White House rooms, and she's in the very center of the shot, and you have this really eerie music that kind of has this kind of sound to it, which I had seen that, I guess the same composer as Under the Skin did this soundtrack, so that was awesome to see, and it really, really kind of personified or illustrated her isolation, where she's in these huge rooms, but she's in the very center, just walking slowly, and we're just following along. So it definitely captured that isolation she was feeling in those moments of losing her husband all of a sudden, and what do I do now? I have to move out, I have to do this, I have to do that, and you bring up the feminist perspective of not only are women really into like interior design, but they're also very schedulistic a lot of times with they want to make sure they're doing this, and then, and that's exactly how she had to go about doing it, and going against all these forces who were telling her like what LBJ is like, you can kind of, she's kind of feeling the pressure of him wanting to move in and her move out, but at the same time she has to make sure she doesn't leave any stone unturned. So Joey, any thoughts?
I mean, I think you said pretty much everything there really well, because everything, she's got so much she's trying to handle. She's dealing with like the loss of her husband, but then you've got LBJ's like, hey, can you guys move out? And she's like, bruh, he's not even in the ground yet, like. And then so you've got Bobby's running interference, which I found him to be a really annoying character. I mean, not saying that he like the actor did a bad job. It was just that he the one scene you just mentioned it.
I really liked his character because he was kind of like the JFK conduit. Like since JFK gets assassinated, we don't really get the political aspect of like the legacy, but Bobby kind of mentions certain aspects of it, whether it be like how he handled the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth. A lot of the things I think about when I think of JFK's legacy and the mission to space.
Well, yes, and he does well, but he's sitting there like talking about we just needed more time, we could have done this and this and this, and it's like, bruh, don't you think that she needs more time with the father of her children? And like it just seemed like where he's thinking more of as a I guess a senator versus at that point being her brother-in-law, and like it just like I don't know, it irked me the wrong way. Like maybe I just perceived it wrong. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like it wasn't like bad or anything. It was just like, bro, you're being really like insensitive. But maybe like I said, I just perceived it wrong or something. It's quite possible.
I think you have a point there. I think that he is a bit overly fixated on the political side in a way that was inconsiderate to her emotional state. And yet he was her big defender as well, though, right? In some other scenes, right, where he like kind of was her big brother. So I like that he had like a dynamic character that was in some moments kind of off-putting, and in other moments you're kind of celebrating. All right, like awesome man for defending or sticking up, protecting Jackie. But yeah, I definitely found him abrasive at times as well. I love that you brought up the score. I feel like the score is the unsung hero of this film. It really propels each scene, and it's so haunting with those strings that kind of pause. They're very minimalistic. It turns it into like that's what really gives it the horror haunted house type vibe. Like with the montage where she's trying on the dresses and drinking, and I think it's the Camelot even in that scene though. It's another amazing scene where she just constantly. It was confusing to me at first. I was like, are these different moments in time? And no, she just keeps on trying different dresses, right? Kind of playing like a little girl, costuming herself up. But I also love the focus on the gravitas of trivial things. And I even think that's too weighted of a term that has too much judgment. But it kind of depicts Jackie as this very mannered woman who takes every small detail of life and gives it a lot of weight and importance, right? Just as like JFK is a politician who's dealing with like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? These macro level things. She's in the realm of the micro. And I feel like it is a tribute to the importance of these things, because these are big decisions, as weird as they are. Like the way she held herself and the way she showed composure and poise and elegance after his death spoke like, it did wonders for the nation's psyche in healing and recovery, and it showed strength and fortitude. So it's these small gestures and acts have such magnitude. And I love that this film took the time to imbue them with sort of the cinematic heft, a weight to them. I thought that this was a really powerful film for focusing on such quote-unquote trifling things.
I thought an interesting subtle aspect was they do kind of allude to the fact that he was a son of a bitch in a way, because they don't actually directly say it, but they kind of hint, like the affair with Marilyn Monroe is there and stuff, and that's all very subtextual, but you can kind of see it on her face where, parts of him, she really, but at the same time, she just has to persevere through that part of it and, let Camelot reign.
No, totally. They definitely had some jabs at JFK for being kind of a dick. To just be straight up, right? Like, okay, you could tell you cheated on her. You could tell that she was a little acrimonious towards him still. And that kind of informed her. I don't want to say she was cold. She was definitely distraught. But there was a little bit of an iciness about it all. Which is strange too. Like she was kind of in a state of shock throughout. And I mean, the most brutal scene is when she has to tell her kids, and the way she has to try to translate it into a language that is palatable for them, and how they are still not accepting it. So she gets a little more explicit in saying, like, an evil man took your dad and put him where some other person is in heaven. It just kind of gets a little.
Their baby brother, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the two younger siblings' early deaths or whatever. Oh, gosh, that was a striking moment where they put the tiny coffin, right there next to JFK. And have you guys ever been to Arlington before?
I have not.
Okay. So the JFK, it's the eternal flame. You go up there and there's the flame for him and for Bobby there, and it's kind of on this kind of overlook area. It's a really, really cool part of the cemetery. So I really enjoyed the aesthetic of she's trudging through the mud, trying to find the perfect place for him, and all of a sudden she stops and she's like, nope, that's not it. This is it. And yeah, she did an excellent. I mean, I'm not really sure the historical accuracy of all that, but yeah, that was within the whole the monotonous of this grave after grave after grave. She had to find a spot with meaning, and they definitely came to that. It's funny to think about how I remember learning about this period of history in history class, and you would hear about okay, here JFK got assassinated. Oh, and then the next day, Oswald gets assassinated. But I really like how this story takes us in between those two sudden moments in history and really breaks down the personal trauma of it all from the people who actually experienced it. So I didn't really think much about this film whenever it got nominated for all the awards. What really kind of made it stand out for is I have a version of the 101 movies you should see before you die, and it was very striking that I did see this was added to one of the latest editions of that. I was like, I'm really curious to kind of go in and see, what they have to say about, why this particular movie was added. I mean, it makes sense for me. I was very emotionally invested in this, and so this was made in 2016, and as I was watching it, I was just like, for this being like a newer movie, the visuals don't really pop to me. I was like, why is that? Oh, and it's because, occasionally they mix in this archival footage and to make sure it kind of somewhat matches. I mean, a lot of stuff looks a lot kind of old-fashioned, but there's other moments that are kind of more seamless visually. So yeah, the muted look of the film really matched the time period I think it was presenting.
Yeah, and Pablo Larraín is kind of known for that. He did the same in his film No, which is, I think, a Chilean political drama starring Gail Bernasio, the guy from the Motorcycle Diaries, and Y Tu Mama Tambien, and The Science of Sleep. He's the star of that, and that one's a really cool mashup of new and archival footage put together. He likes to do like 8mm looking stuff and 16mm grainy archival type footage. And he also likes to play with biography and fiction. Have you seen Neruda, about the great, I think it's Chilean poet as well, Pablo Neruda? Oh, that is fantastic. You're going to love that. It's kind of a neo-noir type vibe. Unreal, so good. That's got to be one you guys got to cover. So he's got a great actual filmography. The Club is about it's very dark material about the Catholic Church and priests who are being punished for their transgressions that are very topical, and they all get sent to this home, and one of their victims comes to haunt them. It's a really dark movie as well. He's had a hell of a 10-year run right now. So just go back and look up Larraín's other films too.
Yeah, that all of that sounds super interesting, and talking about how he does like the grain and stuff, because that's when it's done well. It's something that I super enjoy in movies. So
yeah, same.
Aronofsky's a big fan of it too, right?
Yeah, and actually he was the producer for this film, right? It was Noah Oppenheimer's script.
That.
Yeah, wow. And it was Steven Spielberg actually wanted it for a second, but and Aronofsky did want it too, but he ended up just producing it. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, this definitely. If it's Spielberg had done it, I feel like it would have had a much different feel to it. I mean, it seems like something he would try to do, and I think the movie would have been done well. I feel like it just would have been different. Like,
maybe not if it was because he did do Schindler's List, so he can do emotional storytelling without being poppy. But yeah, it's a good question. Of how would he have given it that Spielberg uplifting factor, or stayed more restrained?
So the gentleman who did this movie, is he older? Or is he like a younger guy?
He's pretty young. I think he's like in his 40s. He's Chilean as well, so it's mostly his films in like South America. He's a Latin American director.
Okay. So
yeah,
I was gonna say the thing, because I was actually thinking about this, because we're all too young. Like we didn't, we weren't even thought of. Like when JFK died, my mom wasn't even born yet. So if somebody like Spielberg, who maybe he might even have been young, but if he had lived through that might have added like a different dynamic as well. Because while we were talking earlier, I was thinking about, like Justin mentioned watching the one movie with his mom, and it's like, well, what if I was to watch this? Like I'd have to watch it with like one of my aunts or uncles, or like my grandma or somebody who lived through this, to see how they would perceive it, to versus how we would. It's it's just it's like a history lesson versus someone who lived through it. And maybe Spielberg would have brought something different that way as well. Just
yeah, you really don't get the reception of the American people in this like you would in like a Bohemian Rhapsody, where they're watching, Queen up on stage, rocking that concert or like really getting the vibes. This is a very closed film to where you never really get the impression of what America was. You just get the mannered, what's the word? What they're trying to portray the legacy as.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, it's very. I think that's actually good with the way this movie is done, because it's called Jackie, so it's not. It's about her reaction and perception and everything versus how did America and I guess the rest of the world kind of perceive it. It's a very narrow perception, but it's also very big in relation, and considering that she's the husband, she's the wife, she's the first lady, all that, or not anymore, but she's the first lady, and all of that when this goes down. So I think that was a good take on it as well.
Totally. Yeah, it's very cloistered and claustrophobic, and I like that it doesn't really expand too much. I was impressed with the parade, the funeral procession, and how many extras they did actually get, because this film seemed like almost low budget because of the way they shot it. And I was curious, being an indie film, like, oh, they definitely had something of a budget because they just had so many extras in those scenes. Just a small, weird, kind of strange thing to observe, but I did notice that as well.
Yeah, my thought, I didn't realize that it was an indie film, but my thought was more of like, most of the scenes, there's not a ton of people. It's the interviewer and her, or it's them in the car, and there's like the 3 or 4 people in the car or on the plane. You might get it, but for the most part, there's not really big set pieces. It's just a few actors here and there, and then it was, like you said, the funeral procession, and then you've got all the people down the sideline, down the side of it. And it's just to me, it was more visually stunning because it's, I don't want to say seemed out of place, but it was so much different than the rest of the movie. It was definitely in place because it's basically a parade. So that made a lot of sense, but it was just different than a lot of the rest of the movie.
Absolutely, yeah. And bringing up Spielberg again real quick, I definitely think Bridge of Spies and Munich kind of fit this vibe and tone quite a bit, as a sort of adult historical drama. And I think he would do a solid job. I don't think it would have been as good as this, just my humble opinion. I think that this one does a lot of experimental things that work. And as great as Spielberg is, he's not experimental in this way. There's just some shots in here, like in that procession, where it's like the handheld camera and it follows the boy going up to the limousine. It's just phenomenal work. I love some shots in this film and some of the decisions. And I think the score, kind of very Johnny Greenwood, There Will Be Blood type score, would not have been a Spielberg score. So just, yeah, but very cool point that you brought up, and about how Spielberg would have lived the time. He would have given an interesting film. I would be interested to see that too. But cool.
And they never give you that moment where, because there's that famous photograph of the little John, saluting or whatever, in that same outfit. You see him plenty in that outfit, but you never see that signature moment. It kind of holds that back from you. One thing I was curious about from you guys' perspective is, so the scenes with her and John Hurt talk, her consoling her priest or whatever, like, I thought they were good, but I think in the overall context of the movie, those parts I could have almost done without. I mean, it was cool to see that, like, she was angry at God about all this, but at the same time, I found those to probably be the most forgettable.
I kind of think I agree with you there. Like, I don't think they were bad. I mean, the whole, I wake up every day, I want to die. But, suicide's for a coward. I was just hoping someone would be kind enough to do it for me, I think is how it was phrased. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, that was, like, I feel like I just was like, where you said you were kind of in a trance in Vice. Like, that's kind of like, oh, she's talking to this guy. I'm like, okay. Even though there was some good stuff there, it's just, it didn't grab me, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
Okay. And I thought okay, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I didn't love that either. I thought that it was too explicit and too much like overt storytelling, whereas everything else was really showing you, like truly just showing you and giving you the tone, or at least dynamic interactive scenes. And it felt like that was just screenwriting 101, where it was like giving you heavy themes to overlay on the film.
Yeah.
That was probably my least favorite part because it felt very heavy-handed. Sorry for interrupting that.
No, it was great to hear your perspective on that, and that you can see where I'm kind of coming from there. And like how John Hurt's kind of acting like this bumbling kind of dude at first who's just trying to say the right thing. Like, yeah, I just didn't feel that matched the overall isolation and trauma of this film. And the ending got me with the whole Camelot stuff. I wasn't really anticipating that, and then all of a sudden it happens, and I'm really anxious to go and read my write my Letterboxd review and to dig into those Camelot quotes and see, what the meat of that is. Because I've heard of the myth of Camelot in terms of the Kennedys, but I don't know really a lot about it. So, this movie makes me want to dig into that even more. And gosh, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys about it. Any other words, or you want to get into ratings?
I'm good with going to ratings. I think we talked about it pretty well.
Same. I'm excited for you to get those Camelot quotes because the way she pulls that allusion and reference to it is pretty neat, actually. It's like, it works very, very well on a meta level. So I'll let you say that for your Letterboxd. But solid film. Check out all Pablo Larraín's work. He's great.
Yeah, I need to do that. I'd give it 4.5. I was very emotionally invested in this one. Enjoyed it a lot. I'm gonna enjoy talking about it, and I'm anxious to write about it.
I gave it 4 stars. Just like I said, I thought it was a very, very well made movie, just for whatever reason, and I think maybe just because of how like dreary the whole movie is because of the subject matter. It just I don't know. I felt like the movie ended, and I was like, oh, okay, I watched this movie. It was really good. But you watch a really good movie, you're like, yo, I watched a really good movie. I was kind of like, I watched a really good movie. Like, so I don't know, just something. It was good, but something just didn't click. Talking about it and some, with both of you guys, it just it brought in some stuff maybe I didn't think about, or it reinforced it in some cases, and so I think I probably like it more after we've talked about it, but I'd still probably think it's in that 4.5 range.
I'm right there with you, Joey. I gave it a 4 too, but I'm kind of wavering in that 4.5 range, especially since these are such great companion pieces. Actually, as different as they were, they're so different to me. They work together really well. I really thought they did, and I think that they're great at what they do, but they're so tonally and narratively disparate from each other that it's a strange pairing, but a perfect one. And I would easily give this 4.5 in an alternate moment. I would say maybe it's a little fatigue with just 60s culture stuff. Like I just have a little bit of fatigue with anything to deal with like JFK, hippies, all that stuff is just like I don't know. I've oversaturated, but that's kind of a superficial reason. So I would definitely try to weed that out in my rating. I don't like to rate on sort of metrics like that, but I'm just saying that might be the reason why I docked the point.
Cool. So awesome to have you on here. Now, if you don't mind, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We got to prep for our next show here. So Joey, where we where we going next?
All right. So, well, it's not where we're going. It's you. Where are we going next? You get to pick from the category that I gave you, which was any movie directed by one Mr. Michael Bay, the great auteur Michael Bay.
All right, and since we have Paul here, we have to take advantage of his opinion here as well. So I'm down to 2 movies, Paul. A movie I haven't seen from Michael Bay, 13 Hours, and my favorite movie from Michael Bay, Pain and Gain. So which one should I pick?
Oh man, I was actually going to say Pain and Gain. I'm actually kind of a Pain and Gain fan. Do you remind me, what is 13 Hours about?
That's the Benghazi.
Oh, actually that one's pretty good. I remember thinking that was a solid film that got maligned because people don't like Bay and they don't like Berg. He's kind of like Berg with some of these films. Peter Berg, who does these kind of macho military films that have heart.
Right.
It's a tough one. Those were my two calls. But since you haven't seen 13 Hours, I'm going to say go with that.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right. So, go ahead, Joey.
Go ahead.
I was about to say, you're like, ooh, Pain and Gain, because that was the one I wanted you to pick, but I wasn't. I also wasn't sure. As much as I like to joke about it, I know how you especially feel about the collection, and I was like secretly hoping you would pick The Rock, because I haven't watched it in a long time, and I own the Criterion DVD and just never watched it, so I was kind of hoping you would go that way. But when it was like, I wanted you to pick one I hadn't seen, which would have been Rock and, I guess either one of these, but it would have been Pain and Gain. So,
all right, where's the Wheel of Destiny taking us?
All right, so the random number generator has given me the number of 26, and so that will take us to where I almost just slipped up, to Rock and Rolla.
Oh wow. 13 Hours in Rock and Rolla. I barely remember this movie. I remember Smokin' Aces. What, aren't those kind of similar films?
Maybe. I've never seen Rock and Rolla, and I'm so far with Guy Ritchie, it's either like I really like it or I don't like it. So I'm interested to see this, but I mean, it's got Leonidas himself in it, so whoa! I'm sitting here looking at the cast. It's like, whoa, there's Idris Elba and Tom Hardy. So it's like, oh, okay, there's lots of people in here.
Okay. All right. So what movie will I have, or what theme will I have Joey go with, down the road? I'm finally reaching the end of my auteur series. I started with Kubrick. We went on to Tarantino, and we went on to Paul Thomas Anderson. So this will be my final auteur that I throw at you. I don't think you've seen any of his movies before.
Okay. Oh, thank God. You were lining that up, and I was just like, oh my God, don't do this to me. But okay, you didn't. So
every time I suggest a Lars von Trier movie, Joey pukes in his mouth a little bit. So.
Oh, not a big fan of Breaking the Waves, or.
He hasn't seen that one yet.
That one I haven't seen. We've done
Dogville and Dancer in the Dark.
Yeah, and
light films, right? Very light, very trivial.
Okay.
Nice Sunday afternoon watch with the grand folks.
Dogville, everything about that movie was like super appealing. It had a big star, Nicole Kidman. The way it was broken into chapters, which I freaking love. And the concept of making it look kind of like a stage play or whatever, I was like, all right, this is really dope. And then after Nicole Kidman was raped the 100th time, I was just like, okay, yeah, sure. And then James Caan shows up and does a bunch of gangster shit, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this was kind of cool. And then, yeah, that was just... It had so much potential to me, and then I just don't think that he and I get along super swell. Having seen Nymphomaniac before I knew who he was or anything, like I remember enjoying that, but I never watched the second half, and it's been a while now since I've seen it, so it's hard to say.
That was a fair recapitulation of Dogville. Absolutely. I remember seeing that at a time where I felt super powerless and like submissive, and I felt like that was just like a metaphor for just like the world owning you. Definitely a very dark movie.
Have you seen Manderley, Paul?
Yes, I have. I like that one as well. I like all his films. I love his very first film. It's really strange.
The Element of Crime?
Yes, The Element of Crime.
Okay, that's a very weird, dreamy one. Breaking the Waves is my favorite. Maybe one of these days I'll get to it. All right, so the auteur I've been building up to is Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
Yep.
Okay. Let's.
I'm very curious to see what you'll pick, since you don't probably know much about any of these movies, and.
Oh, okay.
So this is Royal Tenenbaum's guy. This is Rushmore guy. This is
Grand Budapest.
Mm-hmm. Darjeeling Limited. Yep. Very quirky. Aesthetic. Paul, I mean, what's Wes Anderson in a nutshell?
Widescreen compositions, lots of symmetry, lots of pastel tones, lots of needle drops, lots of ensembles with Bill Murray and Owen Wilson, Quirk, childish, but filled with dysfunctional families and heart as well, right? Like kind of.
Oh, absolutely, especially the Tenenbaums. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Great tableaus as well. They're all great. I don't know which one to start with, but I would go earlier, in one of the 90s or early 2000s. Just
And he's also dabbled in claymation with Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, so it's a lot to choose from. So I'm be curious because Joey's a big plot synopsis guy, so right, Joey, you kind of dig through the plot synopsis to figure out where you're going. So yeah, curious to see where you what grabs your attention.
Yeah, I'm. There's a couple that I'm already kind of more leaning towards, just because I'm at least familiar with them by name. But I might go through it a little bit more and look at it. But there's a couple that I'm interested in, and I actually own one of these movies, so I just never seen it.
Go with that.
Yeah, that's how I live my life. I own so many movies I haven't watched. I'm trying to get through them slowly but surely.
All right, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. And if you'd like to, get a question answered on the Movie Club cast, we'd love to hear from you. How do they get in touch with us, Joey?
The Average Joe's Movie Club Cast at gmail.com, or since that is a mouthful and a lot to type, you can just go to our Facebook page, hit the email button, it'll do it right for you. We would love any questions, comments. If you think that I give very simplified reviews and shit, you can tell me that and make fun of me, or you can praise me, or you can say good things, bad things. We just want to hear from you. Maybe you can be like, I think, was it Paul that suggested a movie that we ended up talking about? Not Paul, Max.
Oh, right. When we were talking about Stalingrad. Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we take recommendations.
Recommendations, requests. Hey, that's an idea, Justin. We can make a Patreon, and at a certain high enough tier, they can actually just be like, "This is the movie I want you to do." Your
name's all over that task, buddy.
One day. But,
so, Joey, why do we do this show?
Oh, you took it from me. Because we love talking about movies.
It was awesome talking to you, Paul. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Oh, hey, we're not going to cut outlet. Paul needs to promote himself. Paul, where do people find you?
Sure, I'll do a little self-promotion at this is the, what is it, the epilogue or the, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Very fitting for, a noir film, right?
Yeah, very, very fitting. Like the post-credit sequence. Find me at Cinematic Underdogs. That's where I'll promote. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Letterboxd. If you look up Cinematic Underdogs, you'll see my reviews. We're on Twitter, Cinematic Under, at Cinematic Under, capital C, capital U. But basically, all the main platforms, just look up Cinematic Underdogs. And if you like sports movies, you'll have some fun. You'll be entertained. So check us out. Thanks for having me on, too, guys. It was a good time.
It was very good. Very, very good. Glad you joined us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, night.
You and I have unfinished business.
Oh? And what's so stinking about it?
Non mi piace il feeling. Spirito Santo.
I think this just might be my masterpiece.